Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, January 14th, 2020 meeting of the Select Board. Meeting has been properly warned, Jan, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. Okay, we had no executive session, so you're watching us all take our seats live and do our adjustments. And at this time, I will not ask for a motion for minutes because there is none. We'll move right into public participation. This is the time for the public to speak about something that is, we're laughing because Carol Lalott is the only public. But this is the time for Carol to speak on something that is not listed on tonight's agenda.
Or
Do you
Russ.
have anything?
Or Russ.
Or Russ? Or Chris? Excellent, there's nobody here for that. So we're gonna move into unfinished business, which means we're moving right into the FY21 proposed budget. Peter?
Thank you. Under the old business tab in your notebooks, there is the usual weekly update to the status of the budget. At the bottom of page 1, it shows the changes that you have made to the budget that staff presented as a proposed budget back in the early November, based on the 7 and now tonight the 8th meeting that you've had to review different aspects of the budget and hear from the public about them. Do you think there's going to be some public here later? My understanding from meeting with the Finance Committee last night, I think we'll see Franz at least later on tonight, but we'll see. So in any event, right now the net change is an increase of $22,000 and change. That is for the $16,000 for Project CARE that was discussed last week. The $1,629 for the Community Marketing Initiative, that was the adjustment that the sponsors of that program asked the Select Board to make so that it would reflect a full 1% of last year's, a full 10% of last year's receipts in the rooms and meals tax. And the Human Services Committee asked for $4,510 additional funding based on the fullness of the recommendations that they made in that regard to Representative Town Meeting and described to you last week. And so as of right now, that's the current status of the budget. You have several additional matters that are unfinished business. They're listed on tonight's agenda, and they're also listed on page 2 of the memorandum that I'm working from. That was the update for you and the public about where we are. The first of those is the Living Memorial Park Pool House renovation or replacement. Back when we were talking about the capital improvement program, the projects part of the capital transfer, in, I believe, the second meeting in November. There was some discussion around what was and wasn't included, and Dave Scholes in particular asked for information about the pool house, a cost estimate for what it might take to replace or renovate the pool house. The rest of you indicated that you wanted that information too, so that it could be heard before you were finished with this budget. So we have brought that to you this evening, and it is these are order of magnitude estimates for budgetary purposes. This is not a precise engineered estimate, but those order of magnitude estimates are $475,000 to renovate the existing pool house, $570,000 to replace the building with a structure that is similar to that which is there, which is a simple concrete block structure, or $760,000, up to $760,000 to replace the building with a more attractive wood frame structure. So it would be demolition of the existing and replacement with something new and wood frame. Carol Lalott is here, and we can discuss the matter in greater detail to the degree that you would like to. But that's our updated information regarding the pool house.
Thank you for that, Peter. David, I'm going to come to you and ask if you want to make mention on this, because it was something that you definitely, all of us wanted to see it, but you kind of spearheaded it. So.
Yeah, well, I was trying to track back to how long ago it was that the process began, and Carol might be able to remember better than me when we talked about the 3 major things that needed to happen at the pool. One was the leak. The other was the deck, and then the third was the pool house. And the pool house is always going to be the most expensive, so it always got pushed back. But there was a pretty firm commitment made from the Select Board to try and do each one of those things each year. And that got stretched out for various reasons. But I think it's at least 5 years.
It is.
And maybe more, just in terms of how long it's been since Molly was on the swim team. And so it's an unfulfilled promise. And I think it's time to fulfill it. It's not on the capital plan. It obviously has dropped off the chart. And it dropped off last year and the year before, and I don't want to see it drop off. I want to get it in the budget and get it done. It's obviously, there's need for it, no question about that. And I'm perfectly content with renovating it's a cement block building. They don't fall down generally unless you have an earthquake. So I would be happy with the renovation. It can't be worse. It really is kind of a pit. So that's my.
I can speak to both the delay and the absence of it from this year's list, if you'd like. That where you were going,
Yeah, I
or were
was
you going
just
to ask
kind
something else?
of, where is it?
Yeah.
It's not in the long-term planning, and how
Correct.
does it meld with it?
Yep. So first to the delay. It's now been 5 years that I've been with the town, and the year that I arrived, there was a very robust conversation that went on just before I arrived, actually. I remember I had been hired, but I was still in Florida, and I was watching on BCTV as Carol described the phases of the work that had been originally intended to be a big project to improve the pool, then had been broken into phases, and then had suffered a delay. So already 5 years ago, there was some degree of delay. And then since then, I fully accept responsibility for having brought to the select board recommendations over the years to break it apart first into more phases so that it was smaller pieces in the hopes that we actually could afford to do each piece each year as we envisioned. And then subsequently to actually drop some pieces off of the plan. And so the reason why this particular element, as sort of the major remaining element from that first vision, had disappeared entirely as we brought forward this year's plan is because of some of the other things that have emerged as needs within the facilities at Living Memorial Park. So the delays initially were much more complicated than that. It was a matter of town-wide prioritizing of where the pool was fitting into other needs of the town. And we did accomplish, as Dave pointed out, we did accomplish the most urgent one several years ago to significantly reduce the leakage at the pool, because there was a lot of water leaking out of the pool, and it was a problem on a number of fronts. And that's not fully solved in a pool of this age. There will always be some leakage in a pool that was built in the 1950s, but it's significantly improved. And then there was a safety issue that had to be addressed regarding the deck, which was uneven and a tripping hazard, and we did that this past summer. And so the two urgent needs at the pool have been addressed. The delays at the pool have enabled us to accomplish other things that year by year have been deemed to be higher priority town-wide. And then this year we came to you with the unpleasant surprise that there are some things that have occurred, some information that we've learned about the needs at the Living Memorial Park facilities that are going to be more substantial than we once understood and more expensive to address. Principally, the replacement of the roof at the rink and the replacement of the refrigeration system at the rink, which together are going to exceed $1 million, probably substantially. And so we then looked at that and said, well, that's not something we can fit into the annual planning for capital improvements. And together with what we already expected would require some borrowing in order to complete improvements at the Public Works facility that are in the planning stages at this point. We looked at the opportunity to accomplish things that really need to be done in facilities that are, in the case of the rink, 40 plus years old, 45 years old. And in the case of other facilities at Living Memorial Park and at the Public Works facilities, we're talking about things that haven't really been substantially updated since at least the 60s and maybe before that. These are very old facilities that need, if not replacement, very substantial renovation. And so in what we brought to you back in November, we identified, because we were now talking about borrowing, it felt to us as staff as though it was important to limit the scope of what we brought to you to what we believed at staff level to be the things that were absolutely necessary. There are other things beyond that that would be desirable, and we completely agree that a pool house replacement or substantial upgrade would be a very desirable thing. It's an old facility, it's a tired facility, it's not an unsafe facility, and so we didn't include that on our list. And there's other things that we might have included on our list if we had crossed that threshold into things that were very desirable and not just things that were absolutely necessary. But the refrigeration system is not going to be, the refrigerant that we use is not going to be manufactured any longer. The refrigeration system has become obsolete. We need to replace it in the next few years, or we're at risk of having to, cease operations suddenly at the rink if we can't get the refrigerant any longer. And we've got a roof that's old and in need of replacement there. Obviously, we can't let get dangerous. And then we've got the other elements of the things that were included on the list. And so this dropped off, but it is certainly a policy question as to whether this or any other element of improvements, whether they be to the facilities at the park, whether they be to the public works facilities, or whether you want to envision from a policy perspective even potentially an investment that's greater than that involves other things that are other postponed needs in the community. We can look at those things together. What we brought to you was trimmed to what we thought was sort of the essential necessity, so as to be able to fully defend the necessity of borrowing once it comes time to go out to town meeting in the public with it.
Okay, thank you. Peter?
So if we want to do something this year, then we need to we'll put it in the budget and then have plans?
Yes, if you wanted to include it, I think the responsible action for the select board would be, if you want to include this as a project that would be done sooner than later, then you could direct us to include it with the planning that we intend to do that so far you have embraced there's I think $15,000 in the project's budget. We can double check that and make sure that's the right amount. Carol's nodding. $15,000 for doing the planning work for these facilities at Living Memorial Park. There's already money that you appropriated last year for the planning for the Public Works facility, and that work is already underway. So we would expect to be able to come back sometime in the next, probably end of the summer into the fall or winter next year with something that's starting to look like a plan around how to move forward with these necessary improvements and the amount of borrowing that we think would be necessary to accomplish that. If you want to put this onto that list so that we scope this as well in the broader piece of work that we know we're already going to be undertaking, we certainly could do that, and you wouldn't be making a commitment to funding the project until you had more information about the project and how it related to other elements of what needs to be done.
I see on the long-term planning
Yes.
that 2023 has no items for recreation and park.
So what you're looking at is the equipment replacement program.
Oh, that's just equipment.
Yep, and I would strongly suggest that we continue to keep the equipment separate from the projects, because this year we're getting on top of equipment in the way that we've been talking about for several years. We've been preparing to do. This is the year when we actually start using the long-term capital equipment replacement plan as the way to keep that expense very steady for town taxpayers. And the place where we're going to have variation forever and ever because of the magnitude of the projects and because of the varying needs between wants and things that are becoming necessary and things that are urgent. There'll always be a greater challenge to make the project side work. And if we try to make the project side work by sort of combining it with that nice steady as we go program over on the equipment side, I think we will regret it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Am I right in understanding that the project plan in fiscal year 23 has $5 million worth of borrowing?
That's correct. So that would be 2 years away from now. What we envision is a year worth of planning, a year worth of decision making, and then a year worth of executing the projects that would be at that point hopefully approved.
Right. And within that 5 million, there's over 2 million for rec and parks and 3 million for DPW.
That's correct. Yeah.
Tim, you want to say anything?
Thank you.
Well,
Sure. No, I'm joking. I'm thankful that David brought this up. I'm very much in favor of looking at this project and indeed the whole pool area as part of preparation for the bonding, because I think it's crazy. It sounds to me, in talking a little bit to Carol, that if we replace the pool house soon, we might be in a situation where everything around the pool house needs replacement very soon after, or we need to deal with increased leakage, or we need to deal with more problems with the deck. And I don't know if Carol can kind of like make sure that I've got this
Yeah,
right.
Carol can come up.
that would be good.
I
Do you
can
mind?
summarize
Being
that.
interrogated?
It's not so much that we think there are imminent needs right behind
Yeah.
the pool house replacement, but that if the pool house were replaced or significantly refurbished, that during its useful life, because it'll last a long time,
Sure.
that some years out, past this next bond, but in a time frame that we all can envision, we would need to do a fuller pool replacement, and at that time, we'd be constrained by this decision.
Yeah, to definitely elaborate on that, I don't think that it would be in the best interest in the town of Brattleboro and the town of Brattleboro users of the facility to back ourselves into a corner that says, okay, this is where the pool house is going to remain. Because if the overall picture is to take a look at the pool and its challenges, you know, the pool, as Peter said earlier, built in 1957, okay? Add the numbers up, you know, and then renovated in the late 80s. And here we are at 2020. You know, so the pool has its challenges. As Peter said, yes, we have stopped the leak. We haven't stopped the leak. We have slowed down the leak. The bathhouse, I'm not going to argue with it all. Yeah, it definitely needs to be replaced and it needs to be upgraded. But I think we would need to, shame on us if we didn't look at the whole picture and say what is the best for Brattleboro and its users. Not what Carol Lott thinks, not what the Recreation and Parks Board thinks. I think it would be really behoove us to put a committee together to look at the whole picture. The users of the facility that are sitting right here in the room now. And because it is a 1957 model. And David, and I know you travel all around the state, or have traveled all around the state. We have a long ways to go just to get to, 1990 improvements. So I don't think it's in the town's best interest to I'm just going to explain it the way I explained it to the Recreation and Parks Board last night. Replacing your kitchen. Okay, you don't have money to do the whole kitchen today, but let's do the sink area. We're going to do the sink because that really needs a lot of attention. Then in 2 years, when we get some more money, we'll do the rest. But you know what? The sink is here, and I really wished we could have put the sink over here without taking a look at the whole picture and look at what's best for Brattleboro and the users. Not for today, but for tomorrow as well. And that's really that's where I'm coming. That's my thought process.
And I really feel like this select board should make a commitment to do a comprehensive site visit for ourselves, just to get our brains wrapped around all of these, what's starting to come up on us on the. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be good for everybody's education and to be able to look at everything and have community input.
But by no means, as Peter said, are we in an unsafe scenario. We're in a tired scenario. And I think, without taking Peter's words that he had used at previous meetings, it's time for a generational upgrade. Okay? We've got some facilities at Living Memorial, the rink, 1975, and the upgrades that need to go with there from the technology standpoint to basically the roof that's over our head. The swimming pool, it's tired. It's tired. It doesn't scream, come and jump into me. The bathrooms certainly don't say, come and take a shower. Come and take your shower.
The pool is beckoning. I go by and look.
I don't know, like my kids like jumping in
Yeah,
there.
the pool is, the pool serves its purpose. But before you can get to the pool, you've got to get through the locker rooms. And that's where the feedback that I am getting on a regular basis for the past several years is, it's scary in there. Well, it's clean. It's painted.
Yeah,
There's lights.
yep.
It's that kitchen that needs to be upgraded.
It's got a certain aesthetic.
It's got its own.
50s pool.
It's got its own.
Well, yeah.
Which is what I grew up with, so of course it's perfectly fine with me.
But
Carol, do you want to talk for a minute about what a nice program the pool is and the self-esteem that the kids get and how nice it is for the kids?
It's where a lot of kids, families create memories. There's a variety of different types of users. There are some people in our community that their summer vacation is coming to the rec department and purchasing their summer pool pass.
yeah.
Because every day they can go to the pool and they can have fun with their buddies and everything, and that really serves a huge purpose. Last year we had over 10,000 users. Duplicated? Okay, duplicated. I'm not going to say 10,000 different, but that was our pool. That was our pool daily attendance last summer. That's a big number. That's a big number when you talk about, and there's a lot of camps that come in there. They come and use the facility as well. But this is one thing that anybody can go to the pool. Our fees are not so high that you can't afford it. And there are those who cannot afford our fees, but never. I don't think anybody in this community can ever say I've shut the door on anybody, because I work with every family if you can't afford to get in. But this is where summer memories happen. And I believe if we talk about people that were residents of this town when they were kids, that's where their summer memories. I talk in department head meetings, and the police chief talks about his memories as a kid, as he grew up, long-lasting memories. Whether he grew up as a kid there, took swimming lessons, hung out all afternoon, or went on to work there. It really is a summer asset for this community.
It's a great vibe. I know my kids love going there. I'm not always a parent-to-parent hanger-outer, but I definitely have met up with other parents and kids there because it's just a nice place to be, for sure.
Yeah, and as I said, I look around this room and I see users. And not just up there.
David, how do you feel now that you've heard
Well, I'd
Carol
rather hear
speak?
from, see what Daniel thinks, and we've got some
Okay,
people in the audience
Daniel.
probably have.
Who wants to hear what you think, Daniel? On the spot.
My opinion is very important. Awesome. I think it's wise to include it in the study. I looked at that big suite of things in fiscal year 2023, and if we deem that this project is, something to work on, then maybe it could be included as part of the proposal of the package of things. Then, I think Carol has enlightened me for sure. I don't feel any urgency with it. I get that it's probably a little tired, but yeah, let's be smart about it.
Is there anybody here in the community that would like to speak? Please come to the microphone and introduce yourself.
Hello, Frederick Noyes, District 3. I think it's on, yeah. We don't hear
It's
it.
only for the TV viewing
Yeah.
audience, not an amplifier.
I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk about this, actually. I asked Carol some questions over the course of the summer. We live in close proximity to the park and utilize the pool regularly with our 7 and 10-year-olds currently. And I've been wondering also as a town meeting rep about the 7 weeks or so that the pool is open every year, and thinking about a community where winter dominates 5 or 6 months of the year. And I feel like it's something we really should think about as a year-round possibility, whether it's a completely different location or part of a different building or whatever. But if you're in the early stages of talking about this, I would be extremely excited. I would be happy to join a committee and help figure this out. But I think spreading out the costs so that we can utilize the pool over a full year would be exciting and a huge improvement for recreation in town.
Thank you.
If the refrigerant fails at the rink, that's an indoor pool right there.
I don't know if Carol's gonna like that.
Very shallow.
Contingency.
I mean, a pretty shallow pool.
It's a feet pool.
It's a waiting.
Can I offer something? So, hearing the amount of interest and I dare say support for actually taking the next steps with this rather than wishing that we could, I think that there's not exactly binary choice, but there's two primary ways in which to move forward that I'd like to frame. And then, if somebody sees a more complicated way that's a better idea, that'd be great. But the simplest thing to do, but doesn't allow as much time for formation of a committee and to let the thing really percolate, with and from the community to turn into a plan that might ultimately be pursued, would be to add a little bit of money. I don't want to shoot from the hip on how much, so I'd like to come back to you next Tuesday with the amount after conferring with Carol and Patrick and others. But I think, we've got the $15,000 in there to plan for the rink. We've got the $15,000 to plan for the maintenance and other improvements. We'll need something like that to, get the engineering that would be necessary to start doing some site planning for what a replacement of the pool on site might look like. If you want to dream bigger than that, I think that's great. But I think it's going to be really hard for us to do that and do the engineering planning piece of it, the more technical piece of it, and stay on the same schedule as the other pieces that are ready for the engineering, that are ahead of this in conceptual thinking. And so I think there is a relatively binary decision to make tonight, maybe tertiary, I don't know. There's maybe three choices. There's the do nothing and keep thinking about it, which I'm not hearing a lot of enthusiasm for. And then there's put it on the list for the potential bond 2 years from now and start actively planning for it. And then there's something that takes a slower path that would likely not catch up to being in the same bond. It might, but it would likely not do that. But it would have a lot of community involvement and become something that hopefully then, once it was ready, could stand on its own merits as something that we would find funding for and proceed with in some manner. Exactly what that would look like.
So, Carol, when you talk about the future and how the age of the pool and stuff, is one of the options to not have a pool? Is that part of what you were
To not have a pool?
To not have a pool.
Absolutely not.
Okay. So you're thinking about a new pool and possibly an indoor one, kind of what Frederick was talking about, or let's just see?
I think that's really what is the community looking for?
Right.
Not what Carol Lott's looking for.
Yeah.
Because I'm a user, but the community are users. And that is the approach that I think is important of what Brattleboro wants. Not what the Recreation Parks Board wants, not what the swim team board wants, but what Brattleboro wants. Made up of maybe select board, rec board, swim team, users. That's where I would.
And it's a process we had expected would be undertaken, but after this next wave of work, that we would do sort of the, to use your kitchen analogy, we'd do the furnace and the roof, and then we go to addressing the kitchen upgrade. But certainly, on behalf of staff, we'd be happy to either incorporate this or run parallel with it if the will of the board is to get started now and start engaging the community.
So you're talking about, if you had 3 items, it would be B and C simultaneously. Planning for the new pool structure as part of the overall kitchen design, and also the community meeting about the future?
I'm suggesting that maybe being insufficiently creative here. I'll plead guilty to that. I'm open to hearing other people say, no, I think we can do it. I think it is unrealistic to think we can do one of those broad community engagement efforts that really brings all the different perspectives together and talks about what, an indoor, brand new, maybe on a different piece of property project looks like compared to renovating what exists there. I mean, if we engage the community in a way that says, let's dream about this, we want to build something. There were folks who dreamt of creating something from nothing in the 1950s and did it, and look how it's still important to the community today. So if we're talking about doing something like that, I believe that's going to take more time than we have available to keep it on the same schedule as the things we absolutely have to get going on. So there's a piece of this that begs back the question that Dave has asked about the pool house versus the pool facility. But if there is a consensus that rallies around the idea that the pool house ought to get addressed, but in the broader context with a potential pool replacement, I'm not really suggesting the two can go, that B and C can go alongside together. I'm suggesting that there would be a choice that needs to be made to slow down, think big, and develop something over the next few years that becomes its own thing around the pool facility, or to move more quickly and assign to us the task of incorporating a potential pool upgrade, either the building or the whole facility, in the context of what we know needs to be done at the rink and with the maintenance building at Living Memorial Park.
I think that B is sufficiently different from C that we should go ahead with B and get this overall kitchen design and the new pool house just planned. Because C, this new potentially indoor year-round facility, sounds very, well, just completely different.
If it's indoor, may I? If it's indoor, it's completely different. If it's replacement on site, it's different in scale, but affected by, in the way that Carol described, it's if it were to be replaced, if the pool were to be replaced on site in the near term, the decision-making around how to do that would be constrained by having moved ahead with the pool house by itself. That's why we're concerned about doing it by itself.
Yes, so can this new pool and the kitchen analogy, which may include a new pool house and essentially a replacement pool and the deck and all that stuff.
Right.
I would consider that to be part of B.
Yes,
Yeah.
that would be B.
Yeah.
But then would you also pursue C when you've just invested that kind of energy and attention and money into B?
Only if you wanted an indoor facility, and I think that would just be in a completely different place.
David had his hand up
Oh,
first.
yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you. Well, I think although the pool is definitely old, I don't think that 5 years since the conversation happened about these three upgrades, I don't think the conditions have really significantly changed. I don't think it's going to fall, well, I'll just leave that as it is. I love the idea of an indoor pool, and that would be fantastic. I also know that not that many years ago, we borrowed $30-some million for a new sewer plant, which is on the utility bill, not in the tax rate, but it's the same people that pay the bill. And we're about to do a water plant, which probably will cost that much again.
Yeah.
So again, on utility, but it's the same taxpayers, the same people who come and say, you can't keep raising my taxes, I can't afford to live here. And if you're saying we're going to need a new skating rink, and we should also look at a new pool, it's just, I mean, I don't have room in my mind for a vision that says that that's at all realistic. And I think that we know the water plant has to happen. The skating rink's going to get a roof and a new machine, but before we run out of the coolant. But that's not going to happen really quickly. That's going to take a while as well. And I think the smart thing to do, given that pool is going to be, even if we did this long-term plan and waited several years to create a really good pool, it still would be an inadequate and scary pool house. And we've been waiting 5 years already, and now it looks like another 5 or 7 or 15. Really, I don't see that really ever happening. I see if the pool house doesn't get upgraded now and it gets put into that long range, large project concept, it'll just stay the way it is and nothing will improve. And I think that
Can I just clarify?
So what do you
No, let me,
want?
please, let me
I was
finish,
just gonna-
please.
Yeah, okay.
I was just going to ask
Yeah,
clarification on what you said.
let me finish. I
Sure,
want to finish my thought.
sure.
The pool is going to be used. The conditions really haven't significantly changed in 5 years, and the expectation and the promise by the select board was that the pool house would get upgraded. And I love the dreaming, but I just don't see it happening in any kind of, I mean, nobody that's swimming there now will ever see that indoor pool. Because it's not going to come ahead of the water plant, it's not going to come ahead of the skating rink. Just in terms of the necessity, survival necessities of a water plant and the politics around the skating rink. So I think if we don't do this, then, and I just, put it in this budget and what the 2 cents or whatever it's going to cost, and fix the pool house this year. Just be done with it.
Tim?
I didn't mean to interrupt at all,
That's okay.
but I was seeking
I had to wait a long
clarification.
time, so I wanted to be able to finish and not get
Yeah.
cut off again.
Sometimes happens. I feel like possibly there's a little mixing of B and C going on. And I think C is something I would never support at this moment because we don't have enough data. We don't have enough community rallying support for that. We don't have enough information that our community would actually support such a huge project and the money it would cost to build that huge project. Or indeed, I love the vision too. You're thinking something like White River Junction facility. I mean,
That was-
maybe not
That's
that
a
big.
big
That was
Yeah.
privately
But-
financed.
Right,
That was not a
I've heard
municipal
about that.
project.
But my point is, I think there's a couple of different levels of involvement, and when I look at this column, I'm referring to fiscal year 2023, the large bonding we're talking about. That's option B, so that doesn't, in my mind, that does include an overhaul of not only the pool house, but perhaps the pool itself and the deck and all that stuff, and kind of doing it smart and realizing that the pool house is part of that whole situation. I'm fully in support of keeping to this timeline and expanding the project examination so that we can get it done on this timeline. But my question is, do we really need to commit to expanding our planning before we do our site visit, do our reading with the community, do our outreach? I mean, because of the timeline, do you feel like that's absolutely necessary?
Because of the scale of what we're talking about,
But we don't know what we're talking about yet.
no,
Okay.
just the
Sorry.
scale of the undertaking to plan for, if you did your site visit and you decided you wanted to include a potential pool upgrade or replacement in the 2023 program, then yes, we couldn't afford to lose a year in the planning. But I would say this, and it's really a policy decision for you about your risk appetite and your prioritizing this over other things that may surprise us later, right? So the best, most business-like way to approach this, and it's unfortunate that we're dealing with it at this stage of the decision-making process for you, because you're the desire to go and see it and do some exploration, which I think is wise. But we got basically a week from tonight. You need to make your decisions, and 2 weeks from tonight, you're going to look at one final budget and say, "Yep, that's our budget." Unless there's some final tweak that needs to happen to it. Because of that, the better, more business-like way to do this would be to put something like 10 or 15,000, maybe 20. I don't know the scale of what we're talking about, which is why we'd want to come back to you with a number next week. But put that money in alongside the 15 that's in there for the planning of the rink needs and the 15 for the rest of the park needs, so that the option B could be done in its fullness, including something for the pool. If that's where the majority of you are, the best way to do that would be to put money in the budget for it. The risk appetite thing I was alluding to a few minutes ago is, this is a relatively small amount of money. I don't know what we're talking about, but it's $15,000 or $20,000 likely to do that kind of site planning for how we might be able to incorporate the pool into the other project, into the 2023 project. And so, that's the kind of thing that in an $18 million budget we can absorb. if you did some site visits and you made a decision after the budget got put to bed. But that's, for us in budget planning,
I'm not
6
suggesting-
months ahead
Yeah.
of implementing the budget, a year and a half ahead of finishing that budget year, for us to consider possibly doing something like that as an off-budget item, it makes me uncomfortable. So it would be better to put a number in here. One other way that you could end up putting a number in here, but it would be you put this question separately before town meeting, is we could buy ourselves the month of February. If you didn't include this in your budget, but we create a warning item for town meeting to consider adding it to the scope of the 2023 project, there could be a separate decision to be made about funding the planning for the pools facilities at town meeting. Not recommending that, but it is one other thing that's available to you. The best course of action, I believe, if there's a majority of you who want to find out what is the scope of this, what would it take to incorporate it in 2023 and freshen up what we've got, either in its current configuration or in some other configuration. The best way to do that would be to tell us to bring you an engineering number next week and to put that engineering number in the budget.
I support that, as long as it doesn't kind of make a leapfrog into the areas that we really couldn't know until we really canvass the community.
We
I mean,
wouldn't actually start doing the planning work until you had made your site visit.
Right, but
and-
I mean, when you do your examination of how much more that will cost and
Right.
bring back to us next week, I would just like it to not be inclusive of something, no offense, like an indoor pool.
A pie in the
It
sky.
shouldn't go all the way to the greatest thing ever. It should go to what we know we can do in 2023. Does that make some sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense to me that we need, if you make that decision that it's Plan B from the ABC we were talking about earlier this evening, if you choose the route that's B, you're choosing the route for this effort that is on that site, either freshening up what we've got or replacing relatively in kind. If there's to be something grander, it's going to have to be another time under another effort. It's not going to be able to happen on this time frame. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I just want to make sure that it's put out there. We're talking about pool house, we're talking about pool. There's a lot of components, there's several components that go into that pool. There's the pool itself, then there's the deck, then there's the pool house, then there's the wading pool.
I was just gonna ask, does that do that toddler
Absolutely.
area
Yeah,
too?
there's toddler area,
Sure.
exactly, and then you got, the filter plant. So those are the 5 big components that would have to go into that planning process, because, again, you can't, build a new house and put in the old 30-year-old boiler and expect that it to click the way you want it to click.
Yeah.
But
So
the
you-
deck and the pool itself have been upgraded already.
I feel like they've been Band-Aided, is the impression I got. Is that right, Carol?
The
deck
leaks
is
have
new.
been slowed.
There were troubles with it, but it's new.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I think the deck is new.
But the
The
pool-
pool is significantly repaired. It still leaks, but it leaks a lot less than it did. It was leaking, millions of gallons a year, and it's leaking less than 1 million gallons a year.
Yeah,
Well, I'm glad for that.
yeah.
Can I ask a really concrete question?
Yes.
So in the 2023 plan, capital project plan for Memorial Park, we have maintenance building work at $450,000.
Yes.
Could you say what that
Sure.
is a little bit more?
So the current maintenance building at Living Memorial Park was an outbuilding on the farm that the town inherited in the 1950s. And it's just, for many years now already, been inadequate for its use. And so we feel like that's a necessary thing. While we're looking at a rink improvement that is on such a scale that we're going to need to borrow for it, we looked on that and said, we've got to include the maintenance building
Okay.
too.
And then there's 2 phases of paving.
There's
Road.
paving within Living Memorial Park when you go from, top to bottom.
Okay.
Especially if the road is fairly decent from Guilford to the upper field to the Kiwanis shelter,
Yeah.
rough shape.
Okay.
And I can shed a little bit more light on that. The scale of the paving is such that if not for the larger project that we see as necessary and coming soon, we would have recommended that as part of just annual funding in the capital improvement program. But since we do see a major improvement coming at the park, putting that into that plan enables us to use more of our cash on paving in the streets where we can never do enough of it.
Okay. And then there's a utility sewer upgrade. Is that related to the pool?
That's just overall within the park. A lot of that is the original piping and stuff that went in and when the park was built. You know, some of that is I would say we're on a regular basis replacing pieces of that as we go up to the skating rink. You know, we had a failure as early this early fall.
Okay. So there's nothing in the 2023 plan that sort of directly addresses the pool?
Nothing at all on purpose in how we brought it to you. This conversation is where you're determining whether or not it ought to be added.
Okay.
I feel like Liz, can I say that I feel like you are interested in to put the money in the budget for Plan B? I feel like, Tim,
yeah.
is that true for you too? I'm trying
For
to
an
like gauge
engineering
everything
study?
out.
Yeah, I'm for B, and I
Right.
thank David for bringing it to our attention.
Do you like the idea of B going into the money going into the budget next week that we look at versus B going to the town meeting and as in
No,
the
no,
form
no.
of an article? I just want, and that's the same for you, Dan.
Sure.
I'm just trying to gauge everybody's because I got a little
Yeah,
lost
I
there.
mean, you know, who knows? You might come back and say it's only going to be $9,000, right?
And David,
No, I mean,
I mean,
getting it done
I'm
is the
for
priority.
this too. So
And that's
Okay.
the reason.
What's
please do that.
Getting
Well, thank you very
the
much.
pool house done at some point is the priority,
Yeah.
and this seems like the best
So
way to go.
for everybody who's been watching and following along, what it looks like we are choosing to do is have Peter and Carol find a number for us to start putting towards the engineering and kind of planning and seeking. We'll see that number next week. And that is with our minds having a goal of new stuff happening there for 2023 regarding the pool house and the pool and the toddler and all of those components. Okay, got that, Jan?
We've got it. We don't need a motion. We've understood
Yep.
the direction.
Yep.
And forgive me this last one. I know we got other ground to cover
of that
tonight.
last comment.
I can't let the $9,000 one go. Only
did you
because I
do?
want to.
Sometimes you surprise us with your excellent
true.
use
So
of our
I
resources.
just want to make sure that we have
gonna be
reasonable
28.
expectations for this. So I don't know what the number's going to be, but my expectation is it's going to be north of 15 because the 15
Yeah.
for the rink has two simple components to it. We already have
Yeah.
a pretty good handle on what the problem is. We just need some help in defining the work that needs to be done. In the maintenance building, it's some pretty simple engineering to replace a maintenance building. The work that's going to be need to be done around this potential pool project is just going to be more complicated than that. I don't know what number we're going to bring you, but it's really unlikely it's going to be lower than 50.
15.
And so when this number comes
Unlikely
back
it'll
to
be
us,
lower than 15.
I'd heard 50, so I
No,
was
no,
just
no, no,
making
no,
sure.
no. Unlikely it'll be lower than 15.
and this number's going to come back to us, and we'll decide whether
Next
we want
week.
to put it in
Yep,
our budget.
Exactly
That's
right.
right.
You know?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you for going through that with us,
framing it.
Carol.
Yeah, no problem.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And that was a beautiful vision.
And I'm still down with it.
No, I mean,
I
Because
grew up
that
with a
7
municipal
weeks
leisure
is
center
just-
and, indoor
if there's a
pool and gym
tsunami of
and
demand,
soccer and all
we
that.
should
Or
look at
even
that.
if it
but-
keep.
But
I know
later, if we
Springfield has
could
a nice
raise money for
pool
that.
inside of
You
a
know, heavy
rehab
bigger
building.
season. Yeah.
Springfield has a pool inside of a rehab building.
Thanks, Carol.
Thanks, Carol.
you.
Okay, so we are still on the budget. We're
We
still
are.
with Peter, and you're taking us through.
Select board salaries.
So,
take it away, Dan.
So there's a fact I think I should simply say out loud, and it's not meant to be glib. It's just a fact that while none of you are getting rich at this contribution you're making to the community's welfare, Brattleboro pays select board members better than anybody in the state except 3 other communities.
Oh, 3.
And I was surprised by which communities they were.
We're fourth, yeah, and
So
inexplicably, they're 3 little
They're
places.
really tiny.
Really little places. But, part of what goes on in those really little places is they don't have a staff.
Yes.
And so there's
And there's
3
probably only
select board
three.
members that are doing
They're just
the
doing the
work of
things.
the town.
Got it.
So in any event, there's
That makes
3
more
of those
sense.
little towns that pay better. Then there's Brattleboro, and then there's everybody else. So
But we're not
go deeper
including
into this if
places
you'd
with
like
city
to, but-
councils.
I'm sorry?
We're not
think-
including places with.
We are
city-
not including places with city council.
And we're the only one with a
Places
Peter.
with mayors?
So if we had it
Yes.
there.
Oh, don't even.
With a Peter.
Let's not start that.
They were not included in our survey.
But I
We looked
thought
at
we
select
did.
boards.
We did look at. I thought Burlington. And they have a city council, right? And I thought
They
they
do.
make around the same as what we do.
I don't know that because
Maybe I made that up.
we were
Don't
working
quote
from
me.
a survey the Vermont League of Cities and Towns did of towns with select boards.
Okay.
Okay.
May
Maybe
I?
I looked at it. Yeah.
So I don't see this as about trying to kind of get rich from being on the select board. What I saw was the line item with, the same dollar value year on year on year for a long time. So in 1996, the chair got $3,000 and the rest of the board got $2,000. And then in 2012, that 3,000 jumped to 5,000 and the 2,000 jumped to 3,000. And those jumps are quite big jumps for, from one budget to another. And what I thought was that maybe it would be wise to kind of have the board salaries linked to whatever kind of non-union cost of living increase or not.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah,
there's
that's
no
right.
cost of living increase. Might be in the budget for staff so that over the years, over the decades, the salaries would keep track with inflation roughly. And, I know that it's still a very small amount of money for the work that the board does. There is part of me that, thinks about this with the kind of equity lens and
Yeah.
the amount of money that we get paid for sitting on this board is probably not why we do it, and it's not necessarily. I don't think making the board salary $1,000 higher is going to mean that we see an influx of people from different backgrounds that we're not seeing right now. It's more about the fact that it takes X many hours a week to do this work, and it's usually at fairly inconvenient times for people with families and jobs and lives and responsibilities, and us folks, I don't know, we've made our choices, I guess.
Yeah. Better or worse.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad to do the work, and I'm not gonna fight over this, but I wanted to just at least have the conversation for 5 minutes.
I think we should lower the chair, take $2,000 extra away from the chair, split it 5 ways, and everybody makes $3,400. Because
Yeah.
I think the work is the same,
I disagree.
pretty much. I don't know. I kind of like this one town where everybody got the same amount, because sometimes people are covering for me, sometimes Tim's covering for me, sometimes Liz went and covered for me once. So I don't know. Just throwing that out there. We're throwing stuff out there.
Sure.
I like your idea too of an increase, and I also on top of that was like, do I need to make this position need to make $2,000 a year more than everybody else? I don't know. Tim?
Let me first say that I'm not in favor of a raise for the select board. But I want to point out a procedural thing that I think might alleviate us a little bit. It's never been the case, as far as I understand, looking back in history, that the select board itself suggests a raise. It's always on the town meeting, what shall the town pay its select board's a salary. But it has been, the last 2 times at least, town meeting that has stood up and argued the issue and forced, literally, the raise onto the select board because they're the final deciders. That body is the deciders of what we get paid. So I think I'm not personally in favor of a raise, but I'm also sort of strongly opposed to us taking a position at all. I don't see why we should do that. I have a feeling, since you brought it up, and it does pretty much come up every year, someone stands
so,
and advocates, and because it is a really real issue of who can afford to serve and who can afford not to serve. But that issue, as you say, it doesn't go away with an additional 1,000 or a few hundred or whatever. And once you start to bump it up, you start to wonder, what is that role, the volunteerism versus the pay role position? How does that affect the politics of our town? So I think I'm just advocating for letting it be as always and seeing if the conversation continues at town meeting.
David?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all of that. The town meeting always does have a robust conversation about it, and all of these points and many more come up. And I think I would rather just play out that way, rather than us take any action of trying to decide or have all those conversations tonight.
Agreed.
I like your cost of living idea, and representative town meeting will definitely pull it on the floor with some number.
Very good.
Franz?
Check.
Franz. Never sell the community names.
Franz Reichman from the Finance Committee. I would just remind board members that this did come up at town meeting a few years ago, as you're saying it often does. And at the request of town meeting, the Finance Committee looked at salaries for both select board and school board members around the state, polled town meeting representatives, did other information gathering work, and wrote a report that we brought back to town meeting. So at some point you might want to take a look at that.
Is that where I'm getting the Burlington idea? Where
I don't
it was
know.
pretty similar? I think it is. I did not just make that up.
Yeah, there were several towns in there. So anyway, I'm sure Jan can steer you in the right direction if you do want to take a look at it.
Thanks, Franz.
Thank you, Franz.
Okay, are we feeling, Daniel, do you have any more that you want to say?
No.
Anybody? No, don't, whatever.
get to
Say
some
your
pa-
things
let's
about
get to
stuff.
some
I don't ever feel
papers.
bad when I do. Okay, lead us through, Peter.
Solid waste service alternative for households with diapers. So this is an equity issue.
About it. I do.
It's a pure policy question about the role of government and the boundaries that you as a group feel in terms of what we should do versus what goes farther than what we should do as a government in service to individual people or households within our community who have certain particular challenges. So we've been advised by families with children in diapers. When we made the transition a couple of years back to every other week garbage collection, we've been advised that it becomes a hardship to have to collect diapers for 2 whole weeks, and that is especially true for households, renters who have limited storage space available to them, where that can be a factor even just for storing regular garbage, and becomes especially challenging with diapers because of the special qualities that diapers represent within the waste stream.
And I can tell you that putting those diapers in your trash securely in a trash can on your porch outside doesn't always work out the way you think it will.
Yeah. So it's a real issue. I don't mean to make light of it. It's challenging to talk about it seriously sometimes in terms of just what diapers represent in terms of being challenging. But it's a real thing for households in our community. And frankly, as Patrick and I were looking at this to bring this information to you, it is a real thing, not just for households with children, but increasingly for households with elderly people as well.
Sure.
So we don't have a good gauge on exactly how widespread this need is or how many of those households with this need would take advantage of such a program. So more so than usual, we have made a guess here rather than brought you a good calculated number. But I can tell you that the dollar estimate here, which we looked at as being in the range of $5,000 to $10,000 for the year. So for the pricing of it, for the purposes of estimating tax impact, looked at an $8,000 line item. That's based on looking at the number of babies that are born in Brattleboro each year to households that have a Brattleboro address, multiplying that by 2, so that we think up to 2 years old kind of gauge on the babies, and then
Up to 4.
And then a kind of rounding factor that assumes that not all of those babies are going to participate in this program, but some elderly people are. And and so we ended up at a place where we said $5,000 to $10,000 looked reasonable to us, and we put the 8 down on the piece of paper. For the benefit of the public who's listening, because I know you know this, but unless folks have read the backup, they don't. The program we're talking about took a while to identify something. It took us a while to identify something feasible with the solid waste district, because we're looking to do something that other towns don't do. And so what has ended up being acceptable to the district and responsive to the concern that we've heard from people in the community is that the town would buy a permit. When people take their own garbage to the solid waste facility, you have to buy it, either buy an annual permit or pay a daily rate. The daily rate is very high if you're going to go back again and again. So we looked at the annual permit process. If you buy the annual permit, then you're able to come all year long to drop off bags of garbage for $3 per bag, which happens to be the same price as the yellow bags for curbside. And so if the town were to initiate this program, and the way that we implemented it was that the town would buy on behalf of participating households the annual pass. Then the participating households would pay the $3 per bag when they actually take a bag to the landfill, and it would be cost neutral to the households other than the inconvenience and cost of actually getting themselves out to the landfill, out to the solid waste
Because
facility.
it's the same yellow bag.
Well, they wouldn't necessarily use the yellow bag. They could, but actually that would double their price. They wouldn't want to use the yellow
Use a
bag. They
regular
want to use
bag.
a different bag
Yeah.
because
A
it's
$3
basically what we're
bag.
saying is that to put it on the curb, you pay $3 for the yellow bag. To take it to the district, you pay $3 to drop it off. So there is the cost of the bag, although the cost of the bag,
God, I hate
when you're buying bags in bulk, isn't anywhere near $3 per bag. So we're looking at it as approximately cost neutral for the households. And the question is, should the town get in the business of buying those annual passes in order to provide a solution, make a solution available in an equally affordable manner across the financial wherewithal of different households in our community to participate in such a program?
David?
So, Peter, they would be on a list and they'd drive in and they'd say, hi, I'm on the list, and they'd get a sticker for their car?
They'd actually, we'd purchase the sticker for them. The town would pay for the annual membership, so to speak, and then
they'd come here and
the
get the
family
sticker.
would get the sticker.
Right.
And then they would just participate like anybody else who had bought a sticker.
Yeah, I think it's not easy, but it's easier than what exists now, and it's probably the easiest thing we can think of. And I think it sends I think this is something that's going to make the front page. If
It's
the
not.
town decides to pay for people getting rid of their diapers, but it's a really good publicity for the town in terms of supporting families and trying to make things a little bit easier for people with kids. But the other thing is that the waste district it's a little different than anybody else that we have relationships with. We get reduced electric rates because of the solar array that's there. We get property tax on the array now. We've got that squared away by now, right? The solar array is paying property tax?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it took a while to figure out what the rate was going to be. And we also get a subsidy from the we get a share of the $125,000 lease fee that is paid to the waste district is deducted from the things that we have to pay for in our assessment. It goes into revenue for the waste district. So there are 3 ways that we save money because of our relationship with the waste district. So it seems like I can't see any reason not to do this.
I have to say something. I don't want anybody to take offense to this, but I want to say that I would have never voted for the pay-as-you-throw system the way that it is set up. It is completely punitive to people of low income and zero transportation, and this does nothing to solve that. If you don't have a vehicle, where are you putting the sticker? And most people who have vehicles have places where they're already storing their diapers. Most low-income people are living in little tiny apartments with things I wouldn't even call a hallway, shoving stuff up against the wall that are trying to walk around every day, and that's their trash can. So I applaud the efforts, but this has never been a system that's been set up to benefit people who are suffering. and I don't know how I feel right now. I guess I'm probably just feeling a little cynical, and maybe I should hear from somebody else like Daniel. Make me feel better, Daniel.
Oh, that's
Get
not
on
going to
it.
happen. So, I was pretty curious about this idea, and as a non-parent, I have no first-hand knowledge of this, so I canvassed opinion of folks that I know. And what I learned was families who have diapers have different ways of managing their waste. There's definitely a class issue. There's definitely, what it ended up becoming, instead of being a question of do we have a good storage and, an equitable system for disposing of diapers, was a bigger question about the equity issues inherent in our pay-as-you-throw system. And this question that we're looking at right now, I reached out to some folks from Winston Prouty who do outreach with families, and they kind of said pretty similar to what you just said, that whilst it would go somewhere towards helping, there's still the question of getting to solid waste. There's a question of paying the $3 every time you go to dispose of it. I guess like having the curbside pickup of our trash is a convenience, right? I create trash, I create my recycling and compost, and on a Sunday night I stick it out on my curb and I don't think any more about it until Monday night I come home and I stick the empty containers away. I don't have to travel up the road, I don't have to take an hour out of my day to get all that stuff in order, and presumably if you're getting all that stuff in order you're also wrangling kids as well and juggling that with jobs. And so what I ended up with was no clear advice from all the people that I know with diapers, no clear direction on what to take, but a really good reminder that people in this town have strong feelings about our pay-as-you-throw system. And while we've done a really wonderful job of reducing the amount of stuff that's going to landfill, I think that the system is one of our systems that creates inequity. And I don't know if I'll be on this board next year, but I would love for whoever is on the board to spend some time maybe taking another look at the system and seeing if there are ways in which we could make it a more equitable system. I'm not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater, but let's take another look at it.
We never advise throwing babies out.
Right.
Liz, did you have your hand up?
Out with the
I'm
diaper.
sorry, Tim.
You missed
So I
that.
guess, my point on this particular issue is I don't feel like we need to take this action. I think that we need to learn a little bit more. Sure, please.
Well, these are all interesting ideas. I think a person could put their badge in their wallet. It doesn't have to be in a car. But there must be some way.
I don't think you can bring trash on the bus, though. I
Well,
thought we ran
no,
into
I
that
just-
issue already.
No,
It
that
would
there
be
must be
popular.
some sort of like a weigh station, or figure out when the other week is, to have an alternative for the people who have the odd week. I don't know, like the A's and the B's. Some way to get the people with diapers to not have to go to the waste
I see what
district.
you're saying, kind of.
That they could
A weeks hook up
buddy
with
up,
B weeks.
like an A week, hook up with a B week, if you have diapers. Like, just think we need to think about it a little bit more to address the concerns that have been raised.
Yeah, because I agree with you. You could probably just stick your pass in your wall, but I'm pretty sure either in my work or on this board that we ran into the issue where the bus company said straight out, no, you
No,
can't.
I don't mean necessarily
Well,
bus, but find some way for people in the odd weeks to join the people whose garbage day it is, so they can put their diapers there.
Tim.
That happens just by people calling on the phone and saying, hey, can I toss my diapers?
Well, yeah.
Is that what you do, Tim?
No. I have strong feelings about this. And I want to tell everybody that initially, when I was on a town meeting rep only years ago, I was against the pay-as-you-throw vote. and we lost
So was
that
I,
vote.
yeah.
And now I'm actually a big fan because I think for everybody in this town, it makes you think about your trash. And there is certainly a class issue with so many things in our lives. And good Lord, kids cost money. And so as the only currently select board member who is dealing with a high volume of diapers, I can tell you for myself, it's an inconvenience to have to wait that extra week, but it's an inconvenience to deal with everything about diapers. And it's not really going to make a huge move of the needle to have this happen, I think. Now, I had to, before the meeting, I looked at your very informal, unscientific thing you did on social media, and I noticed, I counted 22 independent responses to that question, and it was fascinating to read through it. Are diapers, the way it is currently configured with pay-as-you-throw, a problem, was the question. 13 people, more than half, went off into how much they dislike pay-as-you-throw, as you pointed out. But the no, it's not a problem, actually doubled, outweighing the yeses, that it's a problem. So there are twice as many. And full disclosure, it does include me.
Right.
Answering that question.
And it's
Like,
also
did
like
you
a
click on the
particular
profiles?
group of people.
Exactly, that's what I would say.
Sure, and some of them were town meeting reps.
Right.
Who I assume favored the vote. originally.
Robin Morgan was on that thing. And I feel like Robin has a good finger on her pulse of like how families are experiencing.
Sure.
Stuff.
Yeah, she
But
does.
And what did she say?
She said, what did she say? I think
can't
she said,
remember.
I don't
"Yeah, it's
recall
kind of-
anybody out.
Yeah.
It's too late.
I mean, as far as what they said.
Yeah.
But I think it doesn't solve really, a lot of the problem is the transportation, the inconvenience of going from
Right.
stinky diapers that have to be there like up to 1 week to stinky diapers that have to be there up to 2 weeks. There's so much that we really, I draw a line here at, not to make a joke about it, but becoming a nanny state that does have to provide everything that everyone needs. We just can't do that as a municipality.
Well, we could.
Yeah,
if we wanted to.
If we wanted to.
Not without a revolution from most of our citizens, I think. It's
Yeah.
not something that people,
Yeah.
the bulk of our citizenry want us to solve every household problem, and
Right.
nor is it our role.
Right, and I don't think we need to, I don't think we need to solve this problem for everybody, but I think we do need to acknowledge that the current system does create problems for low-income households and fixed-income
More
households.
so than others.
Yeah,
With-
and I think that like the fact that you have
Say
to
it
pay
out
for a
loud just like
bag
that.
Sure.
doesn't. That you have to pay for a bag does not mean that you then change your kind of eating habits and trash habits. It's a little bit like, when people have critiqued like carbon pricing, right? Like if you add 15 cents onto the price of a gallon of gas, it's not going to change the fact that I have to travel 60 miles to work and back every day. So it's about elasticity, I think, right? And like the price of the bag doesn't really change your habits. Like the bi-weekly pickup has an impact, right? And the way in which we made composting and recycling much easier for folks has an impact. But families that are producing, a purple bag of trash once a week, I don't think the price of the bag has much to do with that. It's just, that's adding an extra however much it is for one of those bags.
When I first questioned pay-as-you-throw, the first time I hit this table, I was told by somebody, it might have been Patrick, but I can't remember, straight out, it's meant to be a punitive system. And I think the thing is, it's meant to be a punitive system to everybody, but we forget that there's people whose lives already suck because of all of the punitive systems already in place, so we just stacked another one on their heads.
May I speak to the punitiveness? I think that's a fair characterization. I think it is undeniably a regressive system. A service, an essential service that everybody in town needs to have provided for the sake of public health, used to be provided based on collection of property taxes, and then 5 or so years ago switched over to being a system where every user had to pay the same price per bag of garbage. And the problem with how punitive that feels is town of Brattleboro had no choice of it whatsoever. We had a choice about how to implement the system. We had a choice when we went to every other week. There are other ways to do variable rate pricing, but we had a committee of people from the community who looked at it and said, this is the smartest, fairest, most efficient and understandable way. There's other more complicated ways. There's also other ways that lend themselves more to abuse and people avoiding the responsibility that the system imposes. But that responsibility was imposed by the state of Vermont. The state legislature passed a law, I believe it was in 2014, it might have been a little earlier than that, but it went into effect in 2015, that said every household in the state of Vermont is going to pay per pound of garbage you throw away, basically. There had to be a system where the more you throw away, the more you pay. And the way Brattleboro chose to implement that was by paying for the bags in advance so that you can put the bag out on the curb like you always did. We can revisit that, but what we can't do is defeat the punitive nature of it. It is meant to be equal pricing for everyone, regardless of ability to pay.
Although we now know through all the training we've had of equitable training that fair does not mean same, fair does not mean equal.
High five on that. I would prefer, instead of, it doesn't sound like we're going to go ahead with this anyway, but if we were going to throw $8,000 at something, let's subsidize bags for families that qualify. You can use like a proxy to qualify families. The town doesn't need to be getting into eligibility determinations. If a family receives 3 Squares Vermont, they should qualify.
Is that against the state law?
We'd have to check with the state. Honestly,
That's my Bob question.
I know it makes our heads explode to think that you couldn't do something like that is trying to level a playing field that we view as unfair. But I believe that the state officials responsible for administering that law would tell us that kind of a subsidy thwarts the variable rate pricing obligation that we have under the statute.
And that is the exciting
we're
thing
in a
about
Dillon's
being a
rule
Dillon's
state.
rule state.
Yeah.
Get that Dylan.
Get on your legislators about passing that home rule pilot program.
Yeah.
People. David.
I think it's a really good idea to, just in general, to reconsider a program that's been in place for a few years, and the pay as you throw has been for a while. So, and to look at ways to improve it. I think, and you're welcome. We'd be happy to undertake that next year. It was a very long process, and before it got passed, it got defeated, and it was really engaged a huge part of the town in getting to where we are. But again, as Peter said, it all came from a state law, and that law, the 7th year of that law is next year, which is when everybody is supposed to get their food out and be composting. I suspect that that's going to get set aside. So the legislature is going to act on that because everybody doesn't have the capacity to do that, particularly in the winter. How do you compost in the winter? But I think this would make life better for people that do have a car at $3. And I can't see the fact that it's not perfect and that we have class issues in the society, and we can look at it and see if we can find a way around the states making it impossible for us to provide support for people that need it. I think if this is available for relatively low cost and it's going to help people get their diapers out of the hallway or out of wherever they are, I don't see why to not do it. It's going to help some people.
It's going to help people that can already help themselves. They can already drive it there. The big problem is the people that can't even get it out of their hallway.
Can they drive it there then? Can they drop it off without this permit?
No, well, you can do a day pass, but yeah, I don't think you can drop it off without the permit.
And a day pass is what, $12?
I think what I want to see is us finally throwing money at people maybe who can't take that step, the one step below that.
Well, we could do
Franz
this
says I'm ignoring
and
it.
then research the other.
So we were talking earlier
I know,
about a
Franz.
site visit for the pool, a site visit for DPW.
I'm
Right.
not doing it.
No. Let me finish.
Yeah, come on over.
You know what? I mean,
I know where to
that
take
isn't
you.
where I was going with this. I don't feel like, as this group of people, we have enough knowledge about whether or not this is actually a problem. Right? You know, the one person who is currently using diapers in their house, well, one declared person that's currently using diapers in their house.
You don't believe me?
Who's hiding babies in their
no.
house?
It could be
He's saying
others.
hiding babies.
Oh.
Yes. Thank you.
Honestly, we don't know.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's not an issue for you, but I don't feel like we really know enough about this. And I don't know if folks at Winston Priority or Early Education want to educate us a little bit more about what their families are experiencing. I know from working with low-income families that folks that are experiencing all kinds of difficulties in their life are not going to be the first ones to send you an email or write you a letter or get on the phone to let you know about a problem that they think you probably can't fix anyway.
Or don't care about.
Yeah. So
But they might
You
in
know.
July.
all of the middle-class families, I know what they think about cloth diapers. I know what they think about pay-as-you-throw. You know, but like families that are experiencing struggles on a day-to-day basis, I don't feel like I'm qualified enough to actually know whether this is a problem for them, whether this solution actually works for them, right? Solutions should come from people that are experiencing problems, and I'm not sure that this is coming from that, even though this is coming from a really good place.
Yes, it is coming from a good place, and I am acknowledging that. Franz and visitor to Franz. You've made a buddy.
In terms of the philosophical question of fairness with regards to garbage, I think that it's easy to say from an epistemological point of view, perhaps so, but from an ontologic point of view, perhaps not.
You gotta dumb
But on a more practical matter, I would ask, once the program goes into effect, how many dirty diapers do I have to produce before I get a free dump sticker?
It's not about that. It's about how much you can afford to get rid of.
I think for the program as described, it kind of is about that, and I'm just pointing out a practical problem with implementing a program like this would be, I'd love to have a free dump sticker, and if all I got to do is wave a dirty diaper to get it, okay. So think through the consequences is what I'm saying.
So, may I answer that?
if you want
Please.
to.
Well, I think it's a fair observation. I think it deserves a response, which is it's not a fully formed idea, right? We're at the end of the budget process. We were asked to provide something if we could. We actually didn't think we were going to have anything to offer on this, and then late in the game, this came together, and so we brought it forward. We don't know exactly how verification would occur. And we thought of a variety of different ways to do that, and all of them felt both really intrusive and to be a higher bar for the people who particularly need our help versus the families who less need our help, right? It'll be, back to Daniel's point, easier for folks who aren't struggling in a variety of ways to produce whatever evidence we ended up deciding was necessary. We wouldn't just let anybody do it. We couldn't afford to do that, right? So there'd have to be some evidence that you are disposing of diapers in your household, and we don't know exactly how we would do that. But if this gets approved, it sounds like it won't. If it had gotten approved before implementing it and rolling it out, we would have come up with the best way we know how to have an appropriate verification that a household really needed this service. It would likely not have involved demonstrating financial need, but it might have. That's something we probably would have had some additional communication with the board about. Our expectation was, based on how the issue had been raised by the community, our expectation was that the verification would have to do with diapers in the household, not with household income.
Liz?
I think that this is not ripe yet, and like dirty diapers, when it's ripe, we'll know
Liz.
it.
No, Liz. I mean, I want to make it clear, I'm not opposed to this idea. I think you came up with a great idea. my fear would be we say yes to this and then we don't do something more. So I've lost my word. We don't do something to promote more equity within the system for those who really need it. I would be fine with doing this but if this $8,000 to do this means that we would have less opportunity to do something that makes the system more equitable on the bottom end, then I would have to decline this. Does that make sense?
And
I'm not coming out quite right, but.
And if the select board for, the formation of goals for 2020, 2021 decides that taking a look at a program that is now 5 years implemented,
Like David,
to
yeah.
see what's working and what isn't, if that's where we head in the months ahead, there's an opportunity certainly to take another look at this alongside other aspects of the program.
And we could see what could be done within the confines of the state law and what other towns are
Exactly,
doing.
we'll learn more about what's allowed in terms of
I
subsidies.
like that idea.
David,
Well,
I was coming back to you.
oh, no, we'll see what happens. I'm just curious to see what happens when we start talking about pay-as-you-throw again. Because
Oh, I
the
see.
last couple of times, it was a pretty interesting process. Pretty all-consuming.
Tim, any
Next time
final?
we see John,
Oh, not at all. I
ask
think I've
about
said
it.
my piece.
Anybody else? Ricky?
Oh.
Hi, Ricky Rosati, District 2. I have a cold.
I figured.
and, I'm wondering if this would be helpful if there was a survey to collect information on the statistics and relative cost of low-income families who can't afford, they don't have a car to bring their garbage out. If they just had access to a dumpster, I don't know isn't there a cost of getting a municipal dumpster that is like identified? Is there like a sticker on it that says like we will pick this up every 2 weeks? Is there a price to that? Is it like $10, $15 to get one for a year?
I think that would need to be explored as part of this whole examination of the
Yeah,
of the
that's a good
program.
point.
There are, I will say, one aspect of the solid waste system in the community that helps mitigate some of the things we've been talking about is for folks who live in apartments where there are more than 3 units, where there's 4 or more units.
Yep.
There's dumpsters or some kind of a system on the property because the owners of those properties are obligated to provide the solid waste service for those properties. It's 3 and fewer units and single-family homes that are participating in and Patrick's furrowing his brow. Is it 4
Yeah.
and,
I
4
think
and
it's
fewer?
4.
I would like to double check that,
So,
but I believe
but
it's,
it's 3 or 4. I'm sorry.
It's 4 and less.
You believe?
It's 4 and less or 5 or more.
Give Patrick.
I believe that's correct. But before I spoke at a public meeting on the topic, I'd like to take a look at the
You're a wise
original
heavy
text.
person,
True,
and
before.
so I
That was great.
may have misspoken when I said 3 or less, but it's either 3 or 4. So for the purposes of today's conversation, what the point is, mainly, generally speaking, converted homes might be in the curbside program when they're
Yeah.
multifamily, but apartment houses and even some of the larger converted homes are providing their own solid waste, which means there is either a dumpster or a set of cans on the property, and the pickup is occurring more frequently usually than the 2 weeks that we have for curbside.
Thank you. Were you going to say
Tim?
something, Tim?
No, something occurred to me, and it's not,
Okay.
it's not germane.
Jermaine.
But was it funny?
We'll be hearing that word a lot more soon.
If it's funny, I'll allow it. If it's not funny, it's not germane.
No, it will extend the discussion,
Oh,
and I
God,
don't
no.
want to do that.
Let's not do that.
Shall we move on to 7?
Let's move on for today.
So this is purely a policy decision for the select board. The question is, do you wish to recommend $3 per resident or $2 per resident or some other figure or 0? You don't have to put a 7th question on the warning for town meeting. For the last several years, select boards have, and the pattern has been to recommend to town meeting either $2 per resident, so it comes out at $24,000 and change, or a straight $25,000. There's been years when it's been done one way, years when it's been done the other, but it's about $25,000 annually that the town has contributed to this program, and you need to decide between tonight and next week what you're sending forward to town meeting so that we can properly warn the item.
Okay. Anybody want to talk about it first?
Well, can I request a framing of where the money comes from?
Sure.
Just to remind our public.
Yeah, so the source of funds over the years has been program income. Staff continues to believe that's an appropriate place to pay for this. That is money that originated as federal funding, came through the state of Vermont to the town of Brattleboro, to grantees, and in this case, actually, for the funds that have circled back through, been actually gone out in the form of loans through the CDBG program, either for housing or for economic development projects. The money that comes back in when there's a loan through CDBG, the repaid money goes 50% to the state and 50% to the town. The 50% that comes to the town builds up over time as what we call our program income fund. And so the use of program income funds for the SevEd's contribution, because SevEd's explicitly and solely is invested in economic development activities, is entirely appropriate. The question of how much, whether you wish to continue to make that contribution, and frankly, whether you wish, there are other towns that put it in the tax rate. So there is a question as to whether you want to use program income funds for this purpose, but you certainly, there's nothing wrong with how we've done that over the years. We think that's an appropriate source. It does take pressure off of the tax rate. So it's before you as a question of both amount and source, though we would recommend program income as the source if you do decide on an amount.
Okay. Tim?
I certainly support some funding for this program. I support it coming from program income because it's entirely appropriate, which means it's not on the backs of our taxpayers directly. And I think I'm going to surprise a couple people by speaking out in support of fully funding their request this year. In the past, I've been pretty critical about different programs and the way they go about their business, but I've done a lot of looking into what they've been doing lately. And while I'm still critical about some of the way they do their business and some of their programs, I'm of the feeling like we should be a partner in many of their operations. What they showed us at helping with the Neenah paper mill was instrumental in our community for saving a lot of jobs. I know, David, you work with them at the Diversity Workforce Development Committee, and you have
And
thanked
the
them.
small business loan program.
Small business
and
loan.
They're very helpful in that as well.
There is workforce development training that I'm pretty impressed with. There's also recruiting and internships that they do some very good things for Windham County and for Brattleboro. To me, I don't feel this year that I need to make a principled stance on only $2 and not the $3. When it's coming from our program income, which is entirely appropriate for workforce development. And honestly, it's not like we have another group out there working hard for workforce development, and we can weigh our options, and we can kind of like pit them against each other and see who's doing the best. We have this organization that I think does some good work, with some caveats that they could do better in some areas, in my opinion. But I think we can use all the help we can get. And while we do really a lot, everyone should know that I'm acknowledging that the town itself does direct loans, and that's a very important part of this. And in the past, that's why we've, scaled it back a little bit, because we want to have that funds. Well, the fact is we do have the funds, and this is not a huge investment for us out of program income, being over $400,000. So this year I'd like to advocate for fully funding them at $3 per person from program income.
Well, if we fund them, I think it should come from program income. I'm a stickler for not liking per capita funding because I think that Brattleboro always has to pay the lion's share and doesn't necessarily get the lion's share in return. This is a regional program. It goes even beyond Windham County. I understand some towns are beyond Windham County that they serve. And I think it's just wholly appropriate that we give them $25,000. I think that's a nice amount. I think that's what they expect, and I think that they have a myriad of resources coming from all over, coming from the state of Vermont, that, you know, the Chamber of Commerce and Build a Better Brattleboro doesn't get that money because Sevets gets it. So Sevets has a direct line for state resources that our local places don't get. I think they do good work, but I think that they can do that good work with $25,000 and not 36.
Daniel or David?
I think, well, just a couple clarifications. One is that they do serve Wyndham and Bennington County. It's the southern Vermont. The SEVEDS and SEDS is southern Vermont. And I couldn't articulate anything that's been valuable from that relationship, but they seem to think it is. But we do tend to get the lion's share of the services as well, because most of the economic activity happens here, and the larger employers are here, and the larger part of the workforce is here. But the other thing about our contribution, and they've mentioned this a bunch of times when they came in, is that it really helps them with the other towns if they see that we and everybody else, or more and more towns are kicking in, then the other towns support as well. And having the support of the communities obviously helps them with their fundraising, and they do raise a lot of money. Their budget is way over. I mean, this is nothing. It's really symbolic, but it's an important symbol. I think you're right. We should. And the town, once again, the town meeting is going to decide. So it almost doesn't matter what we say, but
Yeah, we're deciding what we send forward as a recommendation.
Correct.
Yeah. Daniel?
but I've been skeptical for a long time. But it's, you know, it's not systemic. It's not the organization. It's certainly not the work they do that bothers me.
What you thinking down there?
I'd probably more on Team Liz on this one. Yeah, I think 25 grand is plenty. I think I don't like the per capita allocation. You know that, yeah. Yeah. I'm fairly agnostic about this whole thing, and I'll let town meeting have their say.
But what would you
May I make a
propose that we
motion?
tell them?
Well,
You could
I
always
never
make-
propose that they say what they want to
Motions are
say.
always in order.
Bunch of smart people.
So I'll make a motion to fund SEVED's BDCC at $3 per capita, translating to $36,000, if you don't like to look at the per capita, out of program income. We can, if you'd like.
Thanks for making
We
that
usually
motion, Tom.
never debate after the motion, but it is allowed. I just feel like I should clarify that, because the way I run it, I
Threw it out so
generally
that
don't.
You could talk about it first if you wanted to.
Typically, motions are made and then you
You
talk
can do it
about
either
them.
way.
Yeah, and you can
We
do it
flip
both.
it here.
You can do it both ways too.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make that motion to get a vote on the record. I do.
Yeah.
I'm itching for a vote these days.
Fine. It's nice to have something
Move
to
on
vote
the
on,
next item.
frankly. Yeah. So Tim has made the motion to fully fund the SEVED's request, which is $3 per resident, which translates to $36,147 from program income. Is there further discussion, or do we just want to vote it? I really am so torn in half that it's almost like when you try to be the last one to order dinner and you go out with your friends. That's where I am. I'm scrambling through the menu as we were getting ready to take this vote, trying to order my dinner. I don't know what happens when
But
you
it's
do.
actually
It's like the-
We're all
when the
going to know my
check
vote
has
at the
come.
same time.
Yeah.
Randy, I just want to point out how extremely insignificant
I
this vote is. It's going to go to town meeting and they're
Appreciate
going
that.
to vote. They're going to do one thing or another.
Thank
It's
you.
kind of,
Yeah.
Well, it is a little different because this year, if you don't mind a little more talking. Sorry.
I know.
Talking
I
is good.
keep looking at the
Talking
menu.
is fun.
Last year, we sent forward a recommendation for 24,000 or 25, depending on how you do the math. And so this would change that recommendation to slightly higher. going into town meeting, and that always has an influence.
And so I would say, why does Seveds deserve that extra, whatever, $12,000 this year?
That's Tim's question.
What is the value that they've added that is, worth that extra 12 grand?
To you.
I thought I sort of encapsulated my belief on that.
Do it again.
But yeah, I just feel like they do good work. To me, I don't see the losing too much by giving them what they requested. And if, in the wisdom of town meeting, they decide that it should be a little less, I'm fine with that too. But I listed off some of the things I've been particularly happy with, and I think that's how I feel about it.
All right.
Brandy?
Yeah, a couple more comments from the board, and then Ricky, I saw your hand go up.
I've been to several town meetings where many members of town meeting had problems with the lack of service for individuals who are trying to start their own businesses, and actually are pretty bitter about it. And I think there could be a backlash if we send them this suggested amount, which is higher than it has been in the past.
Did I see your hand?
Yeah, just, Daniel, the two things that I've seen. One is that this has been an unusual year for small business loans. I'm not sure exactly why, but we've had a lot of situations where we have to be like second or third in line if people fold, and people have had to come back for additional funds because something happened that they didn't anticipate. And well, there are a number of they work really closely with these sort of struggling or coming up or beginning businesses or businesses who are trying to expand, and provide a lot of support for them. And I hadn't seen that before because we didn't really have to talk about that typically in most of the loans. And I don't want to get too specific because everybody knows who they are because they come through here. But it's been it's a year when people have required a lot of support, and they've really provided that. And the other thing is just the ongoing work with the Diverse Workforce Development Committee. They basically provide the staff for that committee. That they set up all the transportation. They set up all the meetings. They contact all the businesses that students are going to come visit. They really do all the work. Diana Wally organizes things and keeps things moving and chairs the meetings, but they really are the staff, and it's really getting some traction now, and we're getting more interest from colleges to send kids here to visit our businesses, to visit our institutions, and look up and consider living here.
And this, sorry to jump in, but this money is there for this purpose. Whether or not you have issues with exactly how they're utilizing our funds, those funds are there, and I'm not suggesting that we draw it down dangerously low or anything. We have those funds, so I'd like to see them spent on workforce development and/or housing, as it should be. And we don't have something really hot that should be using that money right now, so why not partner with a group that is, albeit maybe imperfectly even, it's still hopefully moving that needle a little bit.
Ricky. Thanks.
Hi, Ricky Rosati, District 2, and I was on a webinar earlier this afternoon with Seveds that was attended by about 40 participants that were interested in their upcoming program called the Vermont Climate Catalyst Leaders, and they are choosing just 10 people to initiate climate change, innovation, and employment. And so just whatever amount is invested into them, I have no doubt, because I looked up the majority of the people who were on the webinar. I looked them up on LinkedIn, and they're all just like really fantastic resume and profiles of people that really want an innovative future. That the more we invest into them and enable them to do their work, the more that we're all going to benefit from them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. That was helpful to me.
Yeah.
That was very helpful. Tim has made the motion. We've heard comment, talked about our ideas and thoughts? Is there more comment that needs to come to the floor before we just do it? Just vote. Again, Tim's motion is to approve SevEd's request for $3 per resident, equaling $36,147 from program income. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No.
Nay.
Okay. 3 ayes, 2 nays. Ayes have it. Goes to town meeting where they can tear it apart and double it, triple it, or cut it in half.
Good luck.
And all of those will
Have
be
fun with
proposed.
it. Excellent, thank you. Okay, so we're still on unfinished business, still doing the FY21 budget. Peter's walking us through, and we are moving to the next item. Peter?
So,
Patrick.
we were asked both by members of the public and by the board to provide some visual representations of the budget highlights. We're going to be putting some up on the screen here. The board and those who have looked online have seen what's coming, but you're going to see it in color now. I want to underscore what we have said to you in the past, that what you're about to see is a first stab. It is unsophisticated graphics, but sort of the basic pie charts and line graphs that one would see in representing what we talked about, right? The very basic highlights of what's in the budget, so that somebody who wants to see it in a more visual manner can see at a glance those highlights. We are very much looking forward to getting some feedback from you and perhaps others that will help us look towards next year at, if this is going to become more of a priority, ways in which we can look ahead even to like what software to use and that sort of thing in a way that might be more sophisticated steps in this direction of visualizing the budget information that is otherwise pretty dense.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm glad it's not sophisticated. I think it's exactly how it should be laid out for people, and they always have the backup material. Sorry, Patrick.
Before we turn on the charts, take a look at them and sort of walk through them, I just wanted to sort of close the loop on the discussion we had just a few minutes ago about the curbside collection program and who it applies to. I've taken a look at the ordinance, and I just want to confirm what Jan had pointed out, that it's 4 and fewer is considered residential, and it's 5 and more that's considered commercial.
Thank you very much.
That's all I want to say there.
Perfect.
I want to pop this on and
All right.
take a look.
So we'll walk through these relatively quickly in the interest of time, because we've had some full conversations and we've still got some ground to cover tonight, but we won't rush, so that you get a chance to pause, and particularly so that the public who may not have seen these online will have a chance to take a look at what we're presenting. So this first one, yes.
I'm just realizing it's 8 o'clock, and I'm wondering, do we need to take
Sure.
a break for the interpreters before we get into this, just to make it? Would you like a break? Would you like a break?
Depends on how long this part will
What
be.
do you think, Peter?
I'm guessing about 10 minutes on the slides, and then we could either take a break now or we could take a break then before we go into new business.
Let's do after.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. Thank you.
So the first one is, and all of these are, well, with the exception of a couple that show multi-year trends, otherwise all of the information being presented is based on staff's original proposed budget.
Yeah.
There've been relatively minor changes made by the board, and we thought it was just going to be confusing if we used that data. So we're using the data that's in the budget. That this is all in sync with the budget message, that in a narrative manner with some tables, but not visual charts, not graphs and pie charts. Summarizes already the information that is in the 19 pages of details in the town's budget. So it's that November 5th budget that is the one that we're working with in these charts. So this first one is revenue by type. The most standard visual representations of any budget are where's the revenue coming from, where do the expenses go out to, and this just demonstrates at a glance what we all know very well from dealing with the town's budget and the constraints of Dillon's rule and revenue that's available to municipalities in Vermont, that over 80%, 82.5% of the proposed budget is coming from property taxes. The next...
Wait.
Yes?
That's less than last year. right?
That's correct. It was
And that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. It's because of the creation of the
1%.
1 cent local
Yeah.
option sales tax.
I would just, I just think that is the significant thing, and if there could be a multi-year timeline somewhere that shows that, that might be helpful.
So we actually did look at doing one of those, and the difference, when you look at it over multiple years, the visual difference, I'm not suggesting for a second that it was not a significant step to seize an opportunity to do what we can do to diversify town revenue. That was a very good and important thing that happened. Visually, which was what this exercise was about, a line graph just varies very little from year to year when you're talking about the difference between 85% and 82%.
Can we just put in parentheses on the bottom what it was last year?
Sure.
For everything?
The challenge,
No,
the
just-
challenge
It
of
has
that.
to be fair.
Well, so in the narrative, we spoke to it. We talked
okay.
about exactly that, about how it had changed, why it was less this year and why it was less this year. In the visual, it would be hard to do that because you wouldn't do it just for property taxes, you do it for the others. Now, sales tax would be 0% last year, and it would tell a story. It's going to be a pretty subtle story, I think.
Never mind.
Okay. So this is FY21 as proposed, predominantly property taxes. The important thing is that there is 3.4% of the overall revenue stream that didn't exist until this past year. And that's the sales tax. The rest of it is all relatively equal to what it was last year.
And it's a conservative estimate.
Correct. Based on initial results, we expect it to turn out better than expected, better than planned. The next is the expenditures. By type, we're going to look in a minute at some breakdowns by department. This is the overall budget, the whole $18 million plus, broken down by major categories of expense, and not surprisingly, because we are a service delivery organization, labor-intensive organization, between staffing, which is primarily salaries and some incentives related to the union contracts, but it's the cash compensation to employees, plus the employee benefits that are paid on behalf of employees. It's primarily health insurance, but not solely that. Those two between them make up almost 60% of the budget, 60.2% of the budget is in staffing and employee benefits. And then you can see the relative size of the expense that is related to the various other parts. This again it's a visual representation of something that does already exist in the information that's presented, but has always been up until now in a table that's embedded within the budget message.
Right.
It's just numbers there. Here it's something where you can see more at a glance the relative relationship.
Can I have an example or two of what is in the other, the 5.8?
Sure, but I need to go to my message to
Like
get that accurately.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
General.
Something, that's what I was a little,
Yep, I can tell you in just a second. Just
That county fees.
So, other revenue. This category includes
other
general fund
expenses.
revenue sources. I'm sorry?
Other expense.
Oh, we're on expense, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's okay.
Okay.
$1 million.
I don't care where the revenue comes from, it can just come in.
There's a lot of difference.
Teasing.
Pretty soon it's real money.
Okay.
Unless it's for bags.
Tell you we can do those.
The explanation in other isn't going to be helpful. It's talking about the change from last year to this year. Other this year went significantly down, and it went significantly down because there was $100,000 in the current year budget for sustainability, which has now been moved into the planning department's budget for the sustainability coordinators, the expense of the person and the related expenses of the activities. And so the 100,000 that was in other got zeroed out.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I might suggest that we just sort of focus on the style and give suggestions, because I would have a couple suggestions for the style, but Should we just let you?
Are you
go
suggesting I don't
through?
ask questions that I like?
No, I
know
just
the
mean,
answers
like,
to?
we could get into the weeds if we really start to go into each, and I thought maybe we could give the staff opportunity to just kind of
I
show
would
us.
just like to say the colors are very pretty.
Yeah, I like the color scheme.
They look better on TV than on the screen, though.
Yeah, I suppose the questions kind of indicate
Oh,
that
yeah,
actually
they do.
this is a tool that allows us to think about the budget ever so slightly differently
Yes.
than the line by line in the narrative.
Yes.
Sure.
You know.
How will they be presented? Will there be the text budget and then this set of figures, or will they be?
Trifold board.
Well,
joking.
no, in the town report, one of the challenges will be fitting the information in, right? So you're seeing them as full pages now.
Like, they could be a half page for
First
the
of all,
budget that they speak to.
they are much more useful in color, and they won't be in color in the town report. They'll be as you see them in your backup. And the smaller they get, the less meaningful they're going to be. But you know, if we do, we could eat up 20 pages of the report pretty fast by doing all of this. And so I think it begs the question of whether we want to just put that toe in the water this year, show a little bit of this information in the highlights. In future years, if there is a way, particularly on the website, and we know we need to do work on the website to make it more user-friendly and make this kind of information more accessible out there, on the website, you know, in full color, people can really, if they take the time to go there and click on the budget information, could get a lot in a hurry out of looking at a colorful chart like this. And in the manner, one conscious decision, I'm not going to represent that we're overly proud of this product. This is a first step. It's moving us in the right direction, I think, in terms of making this information more readily accessible to everyone in the community. But one conscious decision we made partway through as we were looking at different ways to do this that I think is important is doing this descending order of magnitude, where you start, you know, when you move from the largest piece, whether that's property taxes on the revenue side or whether it's staffing on the expense side, from the largest to the next largest to the next largest after that, and so on. So there's a relationship visually there, not just in the size of the piece of pie, but in the order of the pieces of pie. And that takes a minute, but just a minute, I think, for folks to kind of look at it and say, oh yeah, I see that, I get that. And now I can go to the next one and more quickly see the relationship between the different categories.
Okay.
One suggestion
Sure,
in regards
please.
to color.
Yeah, we want lots of suggestions.
It's fantastic, by the way. I love these. But staffing and employee benefits, to me, I just want them to be similar colors. Because in my brain, they're the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
That's
warm
fair.
and cold.
That's
You
true.
couldn't get much different.
Pardon?
That's
You
not,
got
I mean,
warm- Yeah, no, I'm kidding.
you just assign colors, but I mean, just you know,
Well,
a
That's a
blue
point. We'll
and
give some
a
thought.
aqua blue.
We'll
Or
give some thought to
agree with that.
color
The-
Because that's
families
all
as it relates to
employees.
category
If
families.
they're
That's all
not
employees.
going to be in color in the town meeting booklet, then why don't we use a series of gray tones?
Because it turns out that way if you
But,
use
you know,
the
like
producing color.
patterns and
No,
stuff.
I understand, but
Yeah.
but it's our opinion, and if the board feels differently, I'm happy to adjust to this. But we think that how many, I don't know exactly how many we're looking at here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 separate pie slices with 11 separate geometric patterns actually gets busy and harder to view than just the variations of grayscale here. That was our opinion. If you disagree, we can make them
I think
geometric.
it's a first
Yeah,
try, and I
fine.
don't think we should try to micromanage.
And this, we don't need to do it for this first cut in a way that just, you know, sort of moves into next year. But I would say using the colors is certainly what we would hope to do in the future, because we would hope that this would be something people would get used to using automated.
Right.
And the colors will make a big difference there.
And maybe when they're online, they click a pie chart and it kind of reveals the sub pie chart.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like you click staffing and all of a sudden you see a new pie chart which breaks down.
So I have seen
Yes.
that tool, and it's not using the software we have now.
It's like, no.
We can't achieve that. But it may be very inexpensive software. That's one of the things we need to look at as we take more steps forward with this. Is what does an interactive tool like that cost? It's probably not much more difficult to set it up because you're basically taking data and using the program the right way to just transport that into visuals. So it's something we definitely will look at for next year.
Do you intend to use any of these at town meeting, like
the
on
first
the screen?
Not so much
Two or
at,
something?
no, we wouldn't plan to necessarily put them up on the screen unless you say that you really want us to prepare in a way that we can do that. We don't normally have a screen like this at town meeting. Our intent was, again, taking baby steps forward to, sort of take the highlights from what we're showing tonight and drop them into the town report as just an introduction of the fact that we recognize that visuals will help. But we're not really, we're not hitting a target here. We're talking about the need to establish a target and then aim for it.
Right. And so the informational meeting, right, for town meeting is great for town meeting members and interested individuals to show up to.
Yes.
And it's still a relatively small subsection of the entire population of the town.
Yes.
I wonder if the library would be willing to host these pie charts on some boards in the kind of the weeks leading up to town meeting, just so folks that aren't town meeting members and aren't reading the town report can see at a glance.
And
what
if we were to do a
text is.
display at the library, we could certainly print them up in color and make it something that people can walk up to and get more benefit from.
Even just the first three.
Somewhere we have to provide them in color, because if we were just to provide only
On
black
the
and white,
website, it has to be in color.
all we would hear is why
Make them
don't we
color.
have it in
So-
color.
so-
Somewhere. I'm not saying
So it definitely pops better in color, and we will do that. I think that's a great suggestion. The bubbles, the boxes that have labels and numbers in them are intended to help people overcome the fact that when it's in black and white, it doesn't tell as good a story.
I mean, I can read it perfectly fine in black and white, but it looks super nice in color. And if we did a nice display, for example, at the library, or the
and I don't know if it needs to be all the slides or just the first three or whatever you think is best.
We'll put something
another
together and
conversation.
we'll present it out in the library, and
I'd
it'll
love
be
the first
based
three.
on
That's
then
some people that's
the final numbers that you agree on next week.
Great.
Right? So sometime early in February, when you are done with the budget and you are sending a recommended budget forward, it'll be the select board's recommended budget that we represent in the library display.
Well, this is great.
Beautiful.
I really like the work that was put into this.
Me too.
I just have a comment on healthcare.
Sure.
Because
Do you want to not go one by one? I'm happy not to if that's what is happening here.
this is the only one I have a comment on,
Already moving on to the.
and it's the last one.
Okay.
And, the percentage of healthcare costs is such an important part of our budget and such a
Yes.
rising cost.
Yes.
That either the percentages could be shown on these years or just so that we could see the rising
So you'd like to
costs.
see healthcare as a proportion of the overall budget?
Yes.
That's something we haven't attempted to
Yes.
display. We could work up a chart like that.
Perhaps.
What this is actually intended to display is within healthcare, because it is such a large expense, the impact of creating that HRA layer back in FY18. And so, we've talked about it verbally. We've got tables of numbers that we've shown previously, but we haven't had a visual that shows that, it was headed up and we actually brought it back down. It was down in FY18, it was level in FY19. We had a bad year that year and it went up a lot for FY20, and now it's relatively level again in FY21. We think this is actually telling a pretty good story, given the healthcare system in the United States and how badly broken it is. For an employer who provides a generous healthcare benefit to its employees, we think that this 7-year trend is actually demonstrating that, we've been right around $2 million, a little below, then a little above now for a 7-year period, which is better than what people have experienced if they stayed with traditional, buy the insurance, have a normal kind of deductible and then insurance coverage
Will
system.
people know that? Will people look at that and understand that?
So I don't know.
what other people understand.
Well, no, well, I don't know that either, but I want us to be careful, and I've said before, I want to say again right now that we don't think these are perfect visuals by any stretch of it. This is a very first stab. We want feedback. We want to make them better. But I'm concerned about trying to do too much with them, too. I think they need to be, they are, by their nature, simplified visual impressions about the budget. If you want to really understand more deeply what's happening in the budget, there's a lot of good numbers and written summaries that we've been providing for years. What we haven't been providing for years is visuals. But to understand that story about what's gone on with healthcare, I think the budget message helps. And then there's a deeper dive you could take by looking at documentation that is available on the town's website about how we've managed healthcare.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like the interesting thing about displaying information in this way. You know, you can be selective, right? So like if we choose to highlight our healthcare costs, we could tell the story of the town controlling healthcare costs responsibly.
Right.
And we could also tell the story of, you know, rising healthcare costs within the context of our, you know, our state picture and our national picture.
Yep.
And which story you kind of like put forward puts the spin on it.
Sure.
Right, we do have to be cautious
You know.
of the spin
Right.
aspect.
Because like this is just the facts.
Right.
Correct. The story we tell about it is like the spin.
That's correct.
And it's not like either of those are like lies. They're just, you know, one is,
But certain things lend themselves to certain arguments.
yeah.
I'm really feeling like there's a program out there that will do all of this sort of user responsiveness. Like you can automatically.
Yes.
So
I've
in
seen
the
other
future, not this year,
municipalities'
but in the
websites
future,
that have that.
Yeah, in the future, I think
Yep.
we should think about that, and allowing it to be interactive for our reps and citizens would be great.
Yeah.
But
I looked
I'm
at
not
that.
advocating for that here this year. But this
We
is,
couldn't possibly do it this
Yeah.
year because we need to identify the software and buy the software and learn the software and set it up online. But
just-
we can be working towards that for next year. Our website also needs to just in general be more welcoming for people to be able to get on the website and find such a tool and use it adequately.
I'm wondering, I'm thinking in terms of trees, if we need this many. A lot of the department ones are very similar. I'm not sure that that's really crucial information for people. Maybe other people see it that way, but I mean, the revenue and the expenses and the salaries by department, debt service, these are things that people ask about. Energy, obviously, energy costs and the energy use, which,
Right.
you know, being in a graphic representation is really helpful. And again, as Liz said, the healthcare programs. I think those are the things
top
that.
five, is that five that you have there?
I was hoping to find 5, but it's actually 7. But I
Okay.
just wonder how many do we want to put in the book?
yeah, I agree, we don't
But
need
something like
each.
that, I think,
If they
David's on
weren't
the
so
right track
similar,
there.
you know, I would, but it's really a lot of staff, and then the programs.
Well, even if they could be like, expense and revenue on one, if pie charts could show.
Okay.
Get it down to 5, I'm all about 5.
So I was keeping up with you there for a minute. The first three,
Yeah.
And
And
then the
then-
energy, and then the healthcare, what was the other one?
There are 2 energies. One is energy,
Oh, yeah.
energy use, and then the other is energy costs, or energy costs, healthcare, and I think there's one after this benefits by department. Debt service.
Oh, debt service.
Right.
I would love to see that, you know, that's going down. That's something we worked really hard to get to. Well,
Right.
you obviously worked really hard to get to.
we did that together. I'd also suggest employee retirement costs because
Yeah.
there was a
Yeah.
significant decision that was made by a board back in 2017
Right.
that led to a substantial savings, and you can see that the FY21 expense is almost identical to the FY15 expense. And
That's
and the
really
benefit that is being received by the employees is significantly better in FY21 than it was in FY15. It was just a pure win-win, a better
So what
benefit
was
to
that
provide to our
decision?
employees and significant savings to the taxpayers.
Great.
What was that decision?
The decision was to move away from a defined contribution plan where employees had to save up their own money and a contribution that they received from the town that was 9% contribution from the town to the employees' individual funds, switching over to the Vermont Municipal Employee Retirement System, where the town is contributing 6% into the system on behalf of each employee, but the employees at the end of their careers get a monthly pension check. So that had existed, a similar system with different numbers attached to it had already existed for police officers and firefighters, but for all the rest of the town employees, this change significantly improved the benefit that they receive and initially saved the town well over $100,000 and has crept back up, but only to the point where 6 years later, it's equal to the cost of where it was back in 15.
If you look at what's at healthcare costs after 6 years, so it's really kind of remarkable.
I'm actually fine with everything, except I don't need the departmental expenses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that I feel, as David
Yeah,
points
yeah.
out, they're
Okay.
so similar.
Let me ask you this. I've heard the feedback, it's helpful. I know that we're going to work together to do something that's a lot more dynamic around this for next year. For this year, does it make sense? It does to me. So let me ask you if it's okay with you. If, based on the feedback we've received, we pick 8. And it'll be definitely the front 3, and it'll be some combination of the ones deeper in based on the things I've heard from you. But the reason I'm saying 8 is once we go to the town report with it, it would allow us to do 4 on a page.
Sure.
You'd do a quarter page.
Yeah,
They're going to be
that'd be great.
small,
Yeah.
but it'll
can see it.
represent this information in a convenient manner.
Yep.
8 of the slides that you've seen tonight. Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Sounds
If you
good.
think it's
All right.
I don't
readable, as long as you
remember,
think it's
but-
going to be readable.
Like, I
We
don't,
won't
think-
let it get so tiny that you
Yeah.
can't read it.
I don't think these individual department budgets.
Right, I'm hearing that. Don't do the individual departments, so that's fine. That'll save a lot. Also, there is a chance, just, I guess the asterisk on this whole thing is if going to quarter pages is so small that it's not useful,
Yeah.
you really can't do
Don't do
half
that.
pages, right?
Because they're
it's-
round.
It's all
Yeah, it
weird.
doesn't,
Yeah.
so we would go back to doing full pages, and we could just use up, 4 pieces of paper.
Okay.
Eight images on 4
Sounds
pieces
good.
of paper.
Great. Please do
But
that.
if you get rid of these individual departments, there's not,
There's about
Right, I
And
think we're gonna be at
it's
around,
very workable.
yeah.
And
Ricky,
the school stuff's not going to be in the town report this year,
That's
so there's
correct.
plenty of room.
come on up, Ricky.
Still have to pay to print them, but
Right.
a lot more room.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, Ricky, and then we'll break.
I'm just curious in response to Mr. Stroll's concern about trees and saving paper. Does the municipal building contract with a paper company that just uses post-consumer materials?
Probably not.
I expect that we do. I don't
really?
know that for sure. I know that we're pretty sensitive to those kinds of things. I don't know exactly what the product is. We'd have to double check for what we get.
Idea.
Could there be a goal to aspire to that?
I'm sorry?
If we,
Oh,
if,
yeah.
Would
if
there be
we
a goal
don't
to
already,
aspire
can there
to
be
that?
a goal
Oh,
to
yeah.
aspire to that? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so
Taking a break.
do we don't need a motion for that, do we?
You don't need any motion on
feel like
that.
you've
We've
got it?
received your feedback.
Yep.
That's helpful. If I could, before we break, just wrap up the budget piece with just one announcement.
Yes.
Which is on the top of page 3 of my memo, I advised the board that we're coming to completion on the review of the non-union employee salaries. We have actually completed that now. The materials are on the town's website so that the public can review them. So is the proposed contract with the NEPBA, the New England Police Benevolent Association. Both of those items are going to be on your January 21st agenda, 1 week from tonight. The NEPBA contract has some changes in it that are significant in terms of our relationship with the employees and the compensation that will be received by the individual employees in that union, but it will not have any impact on this budget because we already knew what we had negotiated. It just hadn't all been reduced to writing yet at the time that we put the budget together back in October. And so the financial impact of that is reflected already in what's before you. The non-union work we just completed, and so that is an adjustment that'll need to be made in the budget, and it'll be approximately $36,000. And I'll go over the details of that a week from tonight.
Excellent. That's actually going to be really exciting. So I hope everybody takes a chance to look at the documents that are online and tune into that January 21st meeting because it's good stuff.
Tune in.
All right. So that concludes the budget. Is that correct? So when we come back from break, we slide into new business?
Yes.
That's what we will do. It is 8:29. I will see you back here at 8:40. Okay, we're back, and as I said, we're moving our way into new business, and Peter has the first item to discuss here. Take it away.
So we're recommending the designation of a handicap parking space on the west side of Main Street. You'll recall that last year, in the fall, you approved the designation of a space on the east side of Main Street, adjacent to the southernmost crosswalk at High and Main. This is directly across the street from there, in front of Duo Restaurant and the Brooks House. There is currently a loading zone. The ADA committee requested that there be a space designated over on the west side of Main Street. The one that has been designated on the east side of Main Street is used almost all the time, and we've monitored carefully the use of it, and it is being used by people who have a permit to use it. And so we recognize that there is still pent-up demand. There are businesses on the west side that would benefit from having a space designated there. So the ADA committee, at the day that this was discussed at the ADA committee, they were also talking about accessibility in downtown businesses. And so Kate O'Connor from the Chamber and Stephanie Bonin from the DBA were both present, and there was a really good conversation around which space would make the most sense if we were going to designate one on the west side. And this loading zone is a space that is just not used very often for its intended purpose. And so it was a really strong consensus of everyone present that that's the appropriate location. We then took that recommendation from the ADA committee to the Traffic Safety Committee, and the Traffic Safety Committee unanimously approved the recommendation as well. So we're bringing it to you tonight because it is our procedure before we go and spend the time to go into that cumbersome process of modifying the town's ordinances. We always want to check in with the board, make sure that you're okay with moving forward and actually doing this by ordinance and changing the use of that space. In this case, we think it's an uncomplicated decision. We hope you agree. ADA, traffic safety, and staff all think it would be a really beneficial change to make this an accessible space.
Thank you very much.
And it's
All
not,
for it.
I think it is, as it says in here, it's not, it's rarely used. It's mostly empty.
As a
I go
loading
by it
zone.
all different times of day, and it's,
Right.
Yep.
And I would imagine that's because people use the back.
Right. Correct. And actually, sometimes High Street, actually. I can't really explain why, but
They do.
Stephanie, as not just DBA executive director, but one of the proprietors at Duo, said they get a lot of deliveries from people who park on High Street and come in through the lounge. So,
Okay.
Would the loading zone still be a loading zone?
no,
Okay.
it will not.
It'll be
The use of that will change. There are plenty of other loading zones around in downtown. Because this one is underutilized and because we have this other need, the proposal is to eliminate it as a loading zone and designate it full-time as a handicapped
Oh, so the
accessible space.
loading zone would become the space. I thought
Right.
it was the
Yes.
space in front of the
No.
loading zone.
The loading zone is
Oh.
going to go away, and the loading zone is going to become the handicapped accessible space.
I see.
Perfect.
Very good.
But I
think
thought
that's
the loading
great.
zone wasn't a full space.
Nope, it's
It
a full
is.
space. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's a hashed area behind the loading zone that's north of the loading zone because of the curb
Oh,
bump out there.
That's what I thought you were talking about.
No,
was that.
there's a
That's
hashed
right.
area, and then there's the space. That space is a loading zone, but now would be a handicap space.
Great.
I had the same thought as Tucker.
Yeah.
I
It's,
thought.
it's
I thought I
very
had my-
much needed.
I know. I looked at
Thing
your
wrong.
nice little diagram.
I just want to say that a couple people did express the concern that a large truck wouldn't be able to use the back, but in the process of the readings of the ordinance, that'll come out if some other business has a problem.
Sure.
I've definitely seen large trucks back there.
Me too.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to.
But
Sure.
that's good to point out. All right, this is excellent. I'm glad to hear it, and it requires no formal action from the board.
That's
Is that
correct. We just want to make sure that you're okay with us moving forward. So in the absence of direction to stop, we will prepare the ordinance and bring it to you. And in fact, since this matter, there's been an additional one on Canal Street that has been recommended for designation as a handicapped accessible space. So we'll bring that to you shortly.
Great.
And then we'll do the ordinance to address both of them
Excellent.
at the same time.
Thank you very much. All right, take us through the next item, Peter.
The next item is a proposed contract with Melanson Heath, which is an accounting and auditing firm from Nashua, New Hampshire, to provide interim finance director services to the town. As you're aware, John O'Connor is in the process of retiring. He had actually planned to retire this past fall. When our first search for a new finance director was unsuccessful, we were looking at options for an interim finance director at that time, and John suggested to us that he could stay on as long as it was okay for him to work a couple of days a week instead of full-time. He's working off his accumulated vacation time, which is beneficial to the town financially, and it meant that we had the benefit of all of John's experience and familiarity as our finance director to be performing interim finance director functions without using the interim term, of course. So it's been, the continuity of that has been really nice. John approached me recently and asked if it would be possible that he not continue to provide those services all the way to sometime in the spring when we expect to bring on a new finance director, and we're happy to accommodate him because, again, he's given us service above and beyond what we had expected, in his original plan for retirement. So we worked to find an adequate solution, and we think we have found one that is more than adequate. Melanson Heath is a medium to large provider of accounting and auditing services in northern New England and central New England. They actually have a lot of clients in Massachusetts and New Hampshire particularly, but also in Maine and Vermont. In Vermont, they do municipal audits for Burlington and St. Albans, so they're familiar with the unique aspects of Vermont municipal finance law. And in fact, the person that Melanson Heath intends to send to us as our interim finance director, Lori Garland, is a certified public accountant and experienced auditor who has been the lead auditor for Melanson Heath on those 2 Vermont municipal audits.
Great.
So we think we'll be in really good hands for this hopefully relatively short interim period. The proposed term of the contract is tomorrow, January 15th through April 15th, with the intent being that Ms. Garland and Mr. O'Connor will spend some time together in the remainder of January. They'll be here together for a few days of overlap, having the passing of the baton, and then Ms. Garland will be the interim finance director until we have a new finance director on board.
Fantastic.
Then we better approve it.
Well, I was just going to say that. And I was thinking, I was remembering what it's like to hear about this decision where this person starts tomorrow.
Yes.
And I was wondering about the appropriateness of talking about the fact that we didn't just decide this today.
Yeah, I think that's entirely appropriate. So this is under contracts and under employee matters. I don't remember the exact terminology that we always grab from the statute to appropriately record it for when we go into executive session. We have had executive session discussion around this in order to make sure that the manner in which staff was preparing to move through this transition was acceptable to the board, particularly that this contract, which is an unusual one for the town, to contract with someone or with a firm to provide department head services, make sure that this contract would be acceptable to the select board. So I knew ahead of time, bringing this forward, that this in fact would be acceptable to you. I should say, the part I didn't say in the earlier summary, for the benefit of the public, I should note that the engagement is for a not to exceed $25,000 fee, where we'll pay an hourly rate up to $25,000, and then if there's hours above and beyond that, they will come with no extra charges. And the estimate from Melanson Heath of the number of hours required to provide these services over a 3-month period is going to be approximately $20,000 of expense for the town. But if we need more than what is estimated and we get up to 25, then we would not exceed that.
Okay.
Are people like this, are they bonded? Like
They're
is there something
insured.
Insured?
Yeah, they're yes, for the actions that they're going to be taking, they're going to be liable, and the contract speaks very explicitly to the amount of insurance they need to carry and so on. It's all been reviewed by Bob Fisher and approved.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, great. Seems like a smart thing to do, and it looks like it is one of the items tonight that requires a motion.
Yes, please.
So I would entertain one from somebody.
I'll make a motion
Excellent.
to authorize the town manager to execute an agreement with Melanson Heath Accountants, Auditors,
of Nashua, New Hampshire to provide interim finance director services.
Excellent. Tim has made that motion. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so our next order of business is Vermont Outdoor Recreation Collaborative Community Grant for 2019 through 2020. We have Sue Fillion from the Planning Department. Thanks for hanging out with us all night, Sue.
No problem. Thanks for having me. So I'm here to request authorization to apply for a Vermont Outdoor Recreation Collaborative Grant. This is the second year of the grant program, and it's intended to kind of promote our recreation assets in Vermont and hopefully affect some economic benefit from it as well. So I've been working for about a year with several trails groups in town, Friends of West River Trail, the Retreat Farm, who has lots of trails on their property, Wyndham Regional Commission, Connecticut River Conservancy, and the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance to figure out how we can better capitalize on our trail assets, because a lot of people feel like we've got a lot here and a lot to celebrate, and yet people look at a place like they look at Brattleboro to come and shop and eat, and then they go recreate elsewhere. And we really want to let people know that no, we have it here too. They can stay and do that. Or if they're thinking about if they live in town or they're moving to town, that these are great assets to have in your town as well. So back in December, we hosted we helped support a Vorax steering committee here in Brattleboro, and we got to tour them around and kind of tell them what our plans were. And they were pretty excited about what they saw in Brattleboro and thought, we got some really positive feedback about this being a great grant opportunity for the town to take advantage of. So what we're proposing to do with it is to kind of create a consistent kind of trails brand, I guess, for maybe some signage templates that we can then work to install at the different public and private trails around town. And then also marketing materials, because again, it is about economic development and, can we increase the rooms and meals taxes? How are we going to go about doing that? So that's the proposal. There'll be some mapping and promotional materials as well. I have been working with this close group, but I think that as the project, if it was to move forward, there would be more outreach. There's different groups in town that maybe have different needs of the trails and whatnot. So
Great. Yeah, we have an amazing trail system here. You are absolutely right. So this is really exciting, and I love the idea. So thank you.
Yeah, we're pretty sorry. If I can just, we're pretty excited because the change that will happen with the existing bridges to Hinsdale becoming bike and pedestrian. We think that has a lot of opportunity to draw people into the downtown, or to just be a trails hub. And whether they're jumping on the New Hampshire trails or they're jumping on our trails, the ability to bring people downtown for that is a big opportunity as well.
Absolutely. Questions or comments?
I think there's a synergy between your downtown design plan, because that was talking about creating linkages between the open spaces, and this is a nice element that's related to that.
Thank you.
I hope we get it.
Thanks.
May I have one quick thing?
Please do.
One really nice aspect of this particular grant is that it doesn't require a local match.
Yeah, we
So
noticed that.
if we succeed at obtaining this, it'll be $50,000 of other people's money to help us achieve these, really nice goals that Sue just described, without having to put Brattleboro money into the pot.
It's great.
Great.
Awesome. This is another item that requires a motion, so I would entertain one. Liz?
I move to approve the Planning Department's application for a $50,000 Vermont Outdoor Recreation Collaborative Community Grant from the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation in partnership with the Vermont Agency of Commerce and Community Development to hire a consultant to steward publicly accessible trails and forests.
Excellent. Liz has made that motion. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, our last item on new business is a representative town meeting warning article from the Connecticut River Conservancy, and we have Kathy Erper here with us tonight. If you'd like to come to the table. And thank you as well for hanging out with us till the end of the evening. We really appreciate it. I know it can be lengthy.
It's not bitter.
I didn't say bitter.
I know, I heard.
I stopped
You
myself.
almost went.
I went,
No problem. Let's see. Where to start on this?
Wherever you want to, Kathy.
I was born.
Yeah. I often struggle with where to start because this relicensing has been going on since 2012, and certainly with select boards, there's a lot of change in the select board members who may not have the full history like the town manager has access to. So a short synopsis, and then I'm glad to answer any questions or then dig into some more details. The Connecticut River in general in Vermont and New Hampshire is controlled by at least 6 hydroelectric facilities that are moving water through the system. It is not run as a natural river. The water moving through is controlled by the hydroelectric dams. Hydroelectric facilities are licensed for a 30 to 50 year period. And you can think of that license kind of as a contract. They're using a public resource to generate electricity, which we need. In some cases, for private gain. These are generally privately held companies. So you could think of the license sort of as a contract with the public to use that public trust, and then, at the end of the 30 or 40 or 50 year, depending, time period, you get to revisit that contract to assess whether you want to continue doing that, if there has been damage to the river, if there are other things to consider, ecological changes, etc. So the relicensing of the 3 lower facilities in Vermont, New Hampshire, which includes the Wilder Dam up by White River Junction, the Bellows Falls Dam, and then the Vernon Dam, started in 2012. And the process of the relicensing, there's sort of the intent to relicense. There is a scoping period in this case where stakeholders are engaged, and then people can request studies. And so there have been 33 different studies over the course of the past 7 years to look at recreation, particular creatures and habitat, in-stream flow, erosion, all number of different things that might be affected in the river. And so another piece of this is because of some of our other federal laws, certain aspects that get examined kind of have you could almost say like a standing that gets deferred to, right? So for instance, the Endangered Species Act requires that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service be engaged in this relicensing to comment on dwarf wedge mussels in the river that are an endangered species. So certain things have kind of like automatic advocates because of other federal legislation, and that includes historic preservation, endangered species, and then also the NEPA process, which is a federal environmental process. Other aspects, don't necessarily have those advocates, and that's sort of where Connecticut River Conservancy comes in as advocating for all aspects, and then in particular also attempting to hold those things that are not necessarily getting the attention of the fisheries biologists or the state regulators that are involved in the process. Which brings us
We're with you.
to really 2 things, erosion and then recreation, which is partly why Connecticut River Conservancy is one of the partners in the BOREC grant and wanting to support that, because there's a question of how the recreation economy might be enhanced in the river valley. So we'll save that for another day. But in regard to erosion, in my capacity at Rivers
as river steward, I've had to do research in this relicensing and follow all the studies and comment on the studies. And one of the things I learned was that in the last time that these facilities were relicensed in 1979, there was a concern at that point that the operation of the facilities was causing erosion up and down the river. And just to give you a scale, the project area for these 3 facilities runs essentially from the Massachusetts border up to kind of Bradford, Vermont, and Piermont, New Hampshire. So it's more than 100 miles, affecting more than 20 towns in the 2 states. And prior to the last relicensing, a group of citizens that were concerned about erosion, they, through lobbying their congressional representatives, were able to get the Army Corps of Engineers to come in and do a study to look at erosion in that specific area. The study was released after FERC issued the license the last time. And the study specifically stated that it kind of ranked the various things that might cause erosion in a river system. And the second causative factor they stated in that study was the pool level fluctuations behind the dam. So at the moment, these dams operate in a way where they, water's coming down the river. It's held behind the dam until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The hydro facilities then start to generate when the electricity prices go up. And they'll generate till about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, depending. It's they're staging it through the whole river, so it's not exactly that time period. But, and then they hold the water again. And so what that means is behind the dam every day, the water level is fluctuating about 2 feet. And so it is wetting the banks, seeping in, and then being pulled out again. And over the course of, days and weeks and months and years and decades, literally, what is happening is that it's pulling the silts and the fines out. The toe of the bank becomes undermined, and then the bank topples in.
Makes sense.
And, anecdotally, from the hydroelectric perspective, one of the benefits of that is you actually increase the impoundment, and you then have more acre feet of water to have access to generate electricity. So, in the grand scheme of the thing, the pressure points that will be put on the company, this one I think is very bothersome. Yeah. Let's put it that way.
I bet.
And also, there is no other kind of trigger looking at it, which is why we've, chosen to try to bring this up to people, and thus the town meeting resolution language. So, yeah, Liz.
That was great.
What would you propose as mitigation for this act?
We've had a couple meetings where we have brought together, geomorphologists, property owners, a bunch of different stakeholders up and down the river. And the general consensus that we've heard from those conversations include, and I put it in the resolution, basically include ongoing monitoring, some sort of adaptive shoreline management plan so that they're looking at it over the course of the next 30, 40, 50 years. Some mitigation money to help with either, either direct buyout of land, conservation easements, and stream bank stabilization work. And
because
yeah.
From what you're saying, it seems like the bank stabilization is the key, because that's the problem that's being addressed. And I know when I was at the Wantastic Reach subcommittee of blah, 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 people were talking about the erosion, but then they were also talking about offsetting it with recreational planning. And I didn't really see the the trade-off there. But it seems to me that if you have a problem with erosion, you want to fix it with bank stabilization.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I'm not following that
I wasn't either. I think that was the point.
And
But
that's,
yeah,
that hasn't-
but it's, you know, is that what you're asking for? You're asking for
Yeah, I
bank
mean-
stabilization?
what we're asking for really is a license article that requires that the company address the issue. And the way we are laying it out in our recommendations, it would include all of those things, ideally, right? So monitoring over time, an adaptive management program, and money to support banks, support towns and private property owners to restabilize banks, fix infrastructure. On the New Hampshire side, I mean, to a certain extent, we're kind of blessed by the railroad on our side because a lot of our infrastructure is further back from the river. On the New Hampshire side, there are 3 towns that are either having to move a road or fix a road using, Army Corps of Engineer money to stabilize it. So there's some pretty intensive municipal infrastructure that is literally being undermined on that side.
Studying, if I were, the energy company and I was told to study something for a couple of decades, I'd study something for a couple of decades before I put any money to bank stabilization. So it kind of would suggest more emphasis on the bank stabilization itself.
Yeah, I hear you. It's the monitoring over time. So right now, we don't even have the data to really understand how much land has been lost. And so ideally included in the license would be the requirement to have some sort of like annual reporting and assessment of what's happening with the banks over time. And they really skirted it in 1979, so we're hoping to have some of these checks in place for the coming 40 years. There's also, just as an aside, this relicensing involves the 3 facilities in Vermont and New Hampshire, and then 2 in Massachusetts. One of those is a pump station where they're sucking, river water up into a reservoir and then flushing it out, and causing the same kind of erosion. So the towns in that area were able to have that pump storage facility take some responsibility for erosion. So they have, actually a kind of an oversight group that meets, and they have to do annual reports, and they have to do ongoing monitoring, and they have paid for bank stabilization projects on private property. So.
I've written 2 FERC applications, and I know that FERC never turns anybody down, but they do take a lot of public input. So I'm really pleased that you're doing this work.
Yeah, and that's generally my in some ways it feels like a kind of classic David and Goliath situation. We're talking about a federal regulatory process that, as far as we can tell, cannot even be, the individual property rights really don't even have any standing. It's preempted by the Federal Power Act, which is one level of concern. And in order for, really our only leverage in trying to provide for some oversight around this particular issue is getting public comment to FERC and them understanding that there are, in fact, people in the area that are concerned about this and are watching. And my hope is that they will then at least put something in the license and we can continue to advocate to make that stronger,
So your goal in the resolution strengthens this public comment and elevates it.
Yes. Yeah. Both on the level of, my assumption and sense is that the town manager and the select board could choose to comment on the revised application when it gets submitted, which we're expecting probably in April. But one of the other things I was thinking with bringing it to the town meeting was that it also enables us to educate the town and provide, you know, an avenue for people to understand it, and then also individuals to comment if they want to. So,
Jim?
First of all, thank you. First of all, thank you for being our river steward. I think it's an awesome
I love it,
position.
clearly.
Yeah, you were made for it. I happen to know. And also, I think it's great that there's a position like that.
Yeah.
A person assigned to actually be an advocate for our river. It's super important. I have sort of a reflection real quick that you can confirm or deny if I'm correct about it. And also just a very quick question. It seems to me that Brattleboro itself is not directly affected greatly by these issues, although you could argue that there is some effects. But sort of us signing on to this and raising public awareness has really helped the overall cause up and down the river.
yeah, and there's differences. So if you, I mean, for one thing, you have to be on the river to, in many areas, you have to be on the river to actually really see the erosion, and it also has to be the right time of day because the water level has to be low enough for you to see the eroded bank. So, but from, it also seems to me that the way that, and this gets a little bit into river dynamics, the way that the size, so for instance, the impoundment behind Vernon Dam is around 26 miles long. Behind Bellows Falls Dam is around 20-something miles long, and behind Wilder Dam is 46 miles long. So you can see that there's actually a point behind the impoundment where it seems that erosion is worse in some towns than in others. And I don't fully understand all the dynamics of that, but along, you know, it partly also has to do with, you know, for instance, if you go up above the Wilder, in the Wilder impoundment, the erosion is at a scale of, you know, like 20 to 30 foot cliffs of you know, open, unvegetated dirt that are just, you know, getting undermined and falling in where things cannot grow. You're not seeing it at that scale necessarily in this section of the river, but there definitely are areas where you can see things being undercut. And it also has to do with particular soil types along the river. So, but yeah, I mean, it's, in my mind, it's a collective effort, you know, and that's also why I wanted to go directly to the town select boards and town managers with it.
And it's truly all connected. You know,
yes.
And my follow-up question was just, and feel free to give it a top-line, very simple answer, but if there is one, does the fact that New Hampshire has jurisdiction, or at least even ownership, you might say, of the river itself, up to our, what is it, the high water mark, low water mark, something like that, does that affect your work and our influence on the process at all? Or?
No, legally it is and I constantly forget if it's the high or low water mark, but it is before the dam was built. So the boundary line, don't tell Whetstone Station.
I had a feeling.
Is actually, you know, could be 50-ish feet in the river. So for instance, if we find a barrel and we don't know if there's something in it that Irene swept into the river that we're trying to get out, and it's on this side of the river, we are calling the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, because if we call New Hampshire, they say, oh no, that's your side of the river. So there is so the river is not fully, got it, under New Hampshire's jurisdiction. It is like, and certainly the banks on this side of the river are Vermont banks. So.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ricky?
Could you clarify, is securing and preventing further bank erosion a necessary requirement that preparing for us to have developed trails along our banks?
Is there a requirement? I don't know. I mean, it really just depends on where the trails are sited. it really just depends on where the trails are sited. I mean, regardless, you want to be able to stabilize the banks to protect the loss of property in this situation, in all situations really. But so maybe I don't understand, maybe I'm not understanding the question.
Well, like Miss Fillion was just talking about advertising the trails.
Yeah.
And like hopefully like there's a shared vision of maybe within the next 5 years of like developing the trails along the bank to be walkable. Right now they're really not managed. And so I was thinking maybe like I was wondering if securing the erosion is necessary in order to protect any trail development there.
I don't know if it is particularly for trail development. From what I understand about where the trails are currently existing and how they might be developed. I mean but that's thinking of Brattleboro and the Hinsdale area only. I mean, if I were to try to think of the other towns, yeah, I mean, you could make an argument. And certainly, one of our other focuses is trying to help the recreation economy. So as you have towns turn back to face the river and maybe do some, provide river access or do development along the river, it's definitely a consideration then.
Well, thank you for considering that.
Yeah.
I think maybe just so the public knows, I think in Brattleboro, a lot of the property that would be really nice to have a trail along is owned by the railroad.
They have a large easement. It's like 250 feet from it's something, I remember that from camping stuff.
Yeah.
It's large.
Which doesn't make collaboration impossible. It's just something to consider that we don't have direct jurisdiction as a town over that portion.
And for liability reasons, I think they like it to keep it pretty to themselves.
Railroad is not known for its collaborative nature.
Thank you, Liz.
There may be reasons why we could convince them it would be in their favor.
That's true.
That's
there always
another discussion.
Is. So this item that Kathy has brought forth requires a motion as well, and because it needs to be added to the representative town meeting for a warning. So
it doesn't need to be. We're choosing whether we want to.
Right. Well, for the purpose of why it landed on tonight's.
That's the ask.
That's right. That's the ask. Is there anybody?
Sometimes Daniel doesn't have a collaborative nature.
I know. It's persnickety by the end of the meeting.
This is a question. Do we want to add this to the warning?
Is there somebody that would like to make this motion?
I'll make the motion. We'll let Tammy decide.
That was mandatory.
All right. I move to add the resolution requested by Kathy Earther from the Connecticut River Conservancy to the warning for representative town meeting.
Excellent. Daniel has taken the time to make that motion. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
I look forward to more education.
Me too.
About this.
It was incredibly interesting.
Very interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Where does that land us? That lands us done.
Way out the door.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh wait, all those in favor? Aye. Meeting's adjourned at 9:16 p.m. Have a good night.
Excellent.
I would say about an hour later than I would have thought.
It's a premature gavel.
Because I'm an hour overdue. I'm an hour overcooked.